wish we could just always do this. Just with everyone, just like
Yeah.
it just exists. This is nice. This
Mhm.
is so nice right here. This is a sweet spot.
I know there's a thought that popped in my head while we were doing that. Is that like often when I take that time to actually go somewhat deep into meditation, then afterwards there's not much desire for anything. So I'm like, okay, well now what do I want to talk about? I don't want to talk about anything. Let's just
Exactly.
we don't need to talk. What do we need to talk for? We already know it all. We know what we need to know.
Oh my God. It's so true though.
Yeah.
I mean, we can jump into let me review. I have my notes from the other. How about I just kind of like review my notes and then
Yeah,
whatever like there's going to be a spark in there for us.
for sure.
If
Yeah.
if you want to review your notes too.
Mm.
Um so I'll kind of concentrate on the podcast.
Yeah, that was
So
a interesting one.
yeah, and then also I mean, I don't know if you're we can flow anyway, but
Mhm.
I mean, vaccines are a big thing right now. So we can
Really?
always talk about that.
I hadn't
Uh,
noticed.
yeah, right.
Oh.
So on my notes, I have like they talked about. So just to refresh our memory, like
Mm.
decentralize your life.
Mm.
Things talking about crypto a little bit.
Mhm.
Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah.
A lot of things about health, what causes disease, Luciferic forces,
Mm.
harmonic forces.
Harmonic. That one was kind of new to me. I didn't hear much about that before.
I neither have I, but it
Mm.
made a lot of sense. It was like
Hmm.
really resonating when he said
Yeah, that's what I found was
it.
so powerful about that talk. And if we do choose to um, publish this for anybody that might be listening, we're talking about a conversation between who was it, Alex Zek and David
Exactly.
Avocado Wolf. And my only encounter with David Wolf before that was I went to a freedom rally last September. And as I arrived in Vancouver, when I got to like they had it at like this art gallery and it was in the front of an art gallery. And when I got there,
Yeah.
they had a massive screen. And as I arrived, he was just finishing his speech. And I'm like, I've seen that guy bouncing around on the internet before, but I didn't know anything about him. He
Yeah.
always kind of I didn't really have any much reaction to him at all, but my basic intuition was that he was just a little bit too zany for me, you know. But then when I listened to his conversation with Alex Zek, although he did say some really radical things I never even considered before, yeah, I was just like, he also speaks a lot of really resonant truth. Like a lot of what he says,
Yep.
like it just goes deep within. I'm like, yep, that's it. Like he's
Same.
tuned in to some degree. Maybe there's something on top of it that I don't know, or maybe that he's misunderstanding or I'm misunderstanding. But I really recognized that he was what I really appreciated about him was his unapologetic truth. Like he was just like, I know this and I don't care if you think I'm wrong. Like,
Yes.
and like
Yes.
that's where I feel I come from a lot of the time. But I then when I interact with society or people, I end up getting kind of beaten back down into my, oh, I might know this, but I don't really know. And please don't get mad at me if I say this thing type of thing. But there's certain things I do feel certain about.
Exactly.
But yeah, so
Y-
out of those
y-
things, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you know what I really enjoyed about him, and then I'll
Mm,
kind of like come up with a topic here if you want to jump into it.
sure.
What I really liked about him, what you sparked within me right there, is he's actually cultivated. This just came to me right now. He cultivated just like that protector energy. Because
Right.
the reason why we have that reaction is because there's a part of our inner child that is like reacting to that. Because like it's so innocent and it like wants to make sure that, you know, it's all inclusive. But
Right.
you also have to create like a protector for that part of yourself because if you don't, it can just be taken advantage of. And so that's what I think I like about him is he's cultivated that protector energy for himself, which is actually really um relevant for
Mm,
me.
mm,
And I think the world, honestly, the world, I'll actually expand this right now. It's really relevant to the world right now because think about all the truths coming out around just coronavirus and COVID-19. Like
mhm.
there's so many truths that are coming out about it, but there's a silent majority that is silent.
Yeah.
because they haven't cultivated the part of themselves that if they speak this truth and they have backlash against
Yeah.
it, they won't be able to stand in that truth. They don't
Yeah.
have the root. They don't have the root yet. They haven't
Yeah.
like rooted it in and grounded it in yet. And so I think what will help with that integration is the protector energy. It's like
Right.
that masculine energy, which has
Right.
been attacked in our culture, in our society, just all around the world, and has been reversed because a lot of things around the protector energy is seen as like toxic masculinity.
Right.
And so like there's this whole psyop going on around in the world. If you didn't know, any of the listeners here, which I'm sure you do, but with that being said, it's like that masculine energy, that protector energy can be something that can be very useful because it's protecting your inner child, that part of yourself that wants to be all inclusive and that doesn't want to step on any toes, that doesn't want to have any conflict, aka separation.
Right.
But you have to first have that separation to be able to have unity, because you have
Mm.
to first know what you're not to know what you are.
Yes. Yes. I know. Right. And that, I think that's the linchpin there. Like that's the key, is that everyone, like everybody I speak to that is on this path of trying to understand themselves more deeply or understand reality more deeply, they
Yeah.
they've had some sense of experience of the freedom, the love, or the bliss that comes from knowing yourself. And but
Yes.
they not everyone has gotten to that by first separating and being the lone wolf, so to speak. So once they get the sense of that love and bliss, then that's their new thing. I just, oh wow,
Exactly.
it used to be drugs, or it used to be women, or it used to be entertainment, and now it's the spiritual path. So like
A
when
new
I
hit.
it's a new hit. I mean, once you get that infinite God love, or whatever you want to call it, it's
It's
something
the new drug
beyond.
on the street.
It's a new drug on the street, man. Love and light is the newest drug on the street. But in order to, like you said, in order to get to that love and light space and have it be
Yeah.
consistent at least, and have it be
Yes.
dependable, you first have to go into the nothingness.
Yeah.
One way I've described it to people before is like, in order to know godhood, you first must know godlessness. Like the way it worked for me was that I got to a point where I was like very nihilistic and apathetic, and I just seen the world as a bunch of bouncing atoms and they had no meaning whatsoever. But
Mm-hmm.
from that point of view, I was able to actually see what things were because I had no emotional investment in any of it. So
Yeah.
then I was like,
Detached.
okay, well, nothing means anything, and that's just the way it is. And okay, all right, cool. I guess that's the way it is. I guess I'll try to make something of myself or whatever, even though it
Yeah.
means nothing. And then from that kind of sense of despair, actually, you know what? It started with despair and fear and apathy, but then it just turned into like indifference. And one of
Yeah.
my favorite authors is Aldous Huxley, and he describes it as a holy indifference. It's not like
Mm.
I don't give a damn. It's not apathy. It's literally
Yeah.
like, things are as they are, and that's just the way it is. And you have no emotional investment in any of it. But from there, from neutralizing the entire universe into nothingness, then you can just flip the switch and make it all meaningful, all purposeful, all beauty, all
Exactly.
love. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that really hinders people on this type of path, is they get a taste for that love and light that comes from their inner self. And then when they go through a dark, like, they get the high wave, and then when they go down to the
Yep.
bottom, they're like, what happened to it? I want it back. Please give me back the infinite God love. But I'm like, oh, it's
Yeah.
down here too. It's under here too. You just got to realize, like, down here is not bad.
Exactly.
It's just the
It's
other
just
side, right?
is. It just is.
It just
I love it.
is.
I love that you said that though, because to go a little deeper into that,
Mhm.
I had it. Come back. Come back. We're pulling it in. We're pulling it in. It's not coming back.
That's not. It might circle back around.
It's gonna serve. If it's meant to
Yeah.
come back, it'll come back. You know what I actually really wanted to hit on really quick though,
Mm.
is actually one of the things that he talked about in the talk about Christ. And
Mm.
so I think in the spiritual community, one of the things that is kind of hindering a lot of people's expansion and evolution
Yeah.
into new territories of consciousness is like not being able to accept Christ because they see him in the dogma and doctrine of like religion.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that really, really stuck out to me was, and just like, as you know, Jesus is a prophet, to me, he is just one of the highest and purest forms of love that has been
Right.
embodied on the earth.
Right.
Like embody. So like in body, he is
Yeah.
embodied, lived out, experienced in a physical vessel, the cosmic love that permeates this whole universe.
Yeah.
And so one thing that really interested me that he talked about and really sparked within me was when he was talking about when Jesus shed his blood and it landed on the earth. And I'll go into this a little bit. Jesus's etheric body became one with the earth's etheric body.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? So if you think about blood, right? This is why blood is so sacred. Blood is sacred because it carries life force. It carries prana. And so it's this pure energy that's running through your circulatory system. And there's also something called the Bong Hong channels. I think it's called Bong Han.
That's
It's
new to
through
me.
a scientist that, yeah, it's a translucent, um, it's a translucent vessel that goes right across your circulatory system, and it's like super, super small.
Mm-hmm.
And they find out that like photonic light actually passes through it. So when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about like being a light body
Mm-hmm.
in like the new age and all like these spiritual communities, like quite literally there's like light that passes through our body, which carries more information than our hormones, more information than our chemistry, like all these different systems in our body. It carries more information than all those other systems in your body. So with that being said, you guys, we are made of light. We do have light that passes through our physical vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And so to explain this a little bit more, think about when people, like females, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this, but they take their period blood, it's just straightforward, and they put it into the earth because that blood is one of the purest forms because it comes from the ovaries. Literally, those are portals to allow spirits to come into this earth. So very sacred. They take that blood and they put it into the earth so they can commune with the earth, so that they can become one with the earth. So they can use their life force to become one with the earth's life force. So think about that, right? So now apply it to Jesus. When he had that blood sacrifice, literally his blood is landing on the earth. It's the same concept. His blood is now communing with the earth. It's becoming one with the earth. And so now let's take let's put this into context. Like, why am I even saying this? Think about all the attacks that are happening on the earth right now. There's oil that's being like these like machines that are drilling into the crust of the earth. There's chemtrails being like put into our air. There's radioactive and electromagnetic fields that are being blasted onto our planet. Why is this important? Like, why am I saying this? Well, these entities, these governing entities, are having an attack on the earth, which is really an attack on Christ. So really what's happening is like there's an attack on Christ that's going on. There's an attack on the etheric body of earth, because all these resources that we're drilling for, that we're trying, there's alternatives. We don't need to do that. We don't need to mess up our earth, but it's I don't want to say planned, but it's intentional. The things that are happening, the attacks on earth, they're intentional. They're not for our benefit. They're posed in a certain way to give to us, be like, no, this is to help you.
Right.
But really, if you start digging underneath the surface and start seeing all the things that are coming up, you can see that like there's so many lies, there's so much manipulation. And once you pull back the veil, you can see, wow, like this makes a lot of sense. This is a lot deeper. This is a lot deeper than I ever even imagined.
Right.
And I keep going deeper into it, and it just keeps opening. I'm like, when does this end?
It's just more and more every time, eh?
And it just all connects. It just all connects.
It really does. Yeah. It's the only theory, let's say, that really gives explanation to all of the mysteries. when you say,
Yeah.
well, why would this be that way and why would that be that way? And one thing that I came up for me while you were saying that is a lot of people, when I talk to them about this type of things, will say, but like, do you really think that everybody in these governing agencies are like intentionally, to use your word, doing this type of stuff? But no, it's like it's compartmentalized. The
Yeah.
majority of people that are in these governing entities are people that are just doing what they think is right. Like, say, someone who is a CEO or maybe a little bit lower of an oil company or something like that. They have been led to believe that all the other energy systems are not sufficient. They will never work. You know,
They're indoctrinated.
they've been indoctrinated, so they don't think there's other ways. So then everybody under them working in the oil fields and stuff like that,
Same
they're
thing.
going to get that same information. You know, like I have friends that I went to school with, and they work in the oil industry, and they'll always be posting stuff online saying things like, you know, oil feeds our families and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, it does. And they'll put stuff like oil does this, and maybe solar is even more damaging to the earth. But my thought is that maybe the way we're doing solar is still damaging to the earth, but maybe there's a better way. You know, everything is kind of limited in the way we do things because of the like basically the monetary system we operate under. If we never had limits because of monetary limits, then we wouldn't have to maybe mine one certain mineral from Africa and enslave all of these children and people in order to get that mineral. Or, you know, there's all kinds of things, all kinds of other ways that we are damaging the earth that we wouldn't have to do if we didn't have these limits that are imposed on us by the monetary system in general.
Exactly.
So yeah, and I'd like to just bring it back around because that was a little bit of a
Please.
tangent, but I really want to expand on that idea of the attack on the etheric body of Christ to make some sense to it, because
Yeah.
like that's something that really resonated with me as well. So the body, the consciousness of Christ, is that what you said? It's like the being of pure love, the one that unconditionally loves all that is. And that is something that exists in the soup of consciousness that we are a part of. That's always a possibility. That's a downloadable program that each and every one of us could download into our being. But in order to do that, there needs to be clear pathways. And by destroying the earth and making really dense, heavy vibrations all over the earth and all over our magnetic field, and, you know, like you said, with all the electromagnetic frequencies, and then to add on top of that, our poison food, our poison air, our poison water, all of these things
All of it.
create dense, dissonant vibrations in our
Yep.
field. So when we try to tune into the Christ consciousness, there's all this muddied water, and then you might get a tiny little single photon of
Little
Christ
blip.
consciousness that gets into you, and you'll be like, for a second, oh, I just want to love everyone. But then all of a sudden, this dense, heavy fear comes in and says, no, but you can't love everyone because they'll screw you over, or you can't trust anyone because you'll end up in a terrible situation. So
The whispers.
yeah, I know, right? So it's all whispers now. You might be able to tune in. So yeah, whether like the whole system is compartmentalized in a way, I do think or believe, whatever you want to say, given everything I've learned over, I don't know, the last 15 years regarding our world, that there is people that are near the top, perhaps at the top, that do know these things, are intentionally keeping us in a lower vibration. Because yeah, I'd say most of the people that, you know, run the companies, and maybe a lot of people in government, maybe a lot of people in banks and stuff like that, they have no idea about the spiritual aspect of it. They're just like, i'm
That's
just i'm just feeding my
dude.
family. But they just do what they feel like they need to do, and they think that this whole capitalistic type of mentality we have is the only way. Like, we tried everything else. We tried communism, we tried socialism, we tried all these things, and it never worked. Capitalism is the best thing we've come up with so far. So they've been indoctrinated into that, so they think that's the only way. And when someone talks about utopia, they think we tried utopia before. But the reason why
Yeah.
utopia never worked in before, like socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, was because we were still based on scarcity. It was like everybody gets the same thing. That would be
Yeah.
communism. Everybody gets the same, but we don't have enough to go around, so everyone gets a little tiny bit. That's why it don't
Hmm.
work. Or if we had an abundance and everybody had availability or access to everything, then it'll be a totally
Yeah,
different story. And that's what we can
exactly.
create. We have the resources, we have the know-how, we have the technology to provide for everybody here. And I think there is a governing body that has its tentacles in every single governing agency in the world that knows this and doesn't want us to find out. Because honestly, if I were to relate to them, I
Yep.
remember being a 5-year-old kid, 6-year-old kid, and I would hang out with my sister and my friends. And one way we had fun was we would have little competitions. And if you won the competition, your reward was the loser had to be slave for a day. And it was so gratifying. I'm like, tell my sister, like, oh, yeah, go get me a soda. Or, like I would have a
Abuse the
slave.
power.
Yeah. Oh, man. And it felt so good. Like at the end of the day, I didn't want to hurt my sister. I didn't want to
Yeah.
abuse to the point that anything was negative, but it felt so
The
good
ego
to
loved
have
it.
that power. Oh, the ego loved it. Like snap my fingers. Oh, go get me a bag of chips, and come and rub my feet or whatever. And that's the thing, is like that consciousness just doesn't go away for some people. They get a taste of that when they're young, especially if
Exactly.
they were born into affluence, like your mom and dad are loaded rich and you get
They don't
everything
know
you
any
want at the
different.
snap of a finger. And then when you go into university and then afterward, everywhere you're bringing that mentality that I just want to keep this party going. I just want to keep everything I
Exactly.
have going. So, and they've also been indoctrinated to believe that some people are just less than you and they're not as worthy. So they don't mind taking advantage of lesser people, so to speak. They don't mind having a slave race. They don't mind
Mhm.
having, the majority of the world working hard 9 to 5 so they can have their thing, because they think, well, I'm of a better quality person and I work harder or whatever. They delude themselves in some way to justify it. So it's no mystery to me how somebody could get to the point in our world that they are willing to have people live in slavery or servitude, or have thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions
Yeah.
of people die just so they can live their life they want to live, because they literally see some people as lesser beings, the same way the majority of the world sees animals as lesser beings. So
Yes.
we need to eat, or we need glue, or we need whatever, we need fur or whatever, so they are willing to make that sacrifice. And there are people that run our world that see the lesser bloodlines, let's say, as a lesser type of being. And then there's this whole movement around eugenics that is very subtle, but if you look beyond the curtain, it's
Yep.
everywhere.
It's there. It's
It's
definitely
there.
there.
So yeah, I mean, it's clear to me, and it's really easy to understand how it, it's not that the majority of the rulers of the world are intentionally hurting people just for the sake of hurting people. They're doing it because that's the way they think it has to be, and they might think they're
Yes.
doing right. I still fundamentally believe that at the core of every being is love, and no person does evil according to their model of reality. Like it may be evil
Yes.
according to me or you,
It's
but
relative.
from their model of reality, they think it's necessary, or they think that there's no other way, or
Yep.
that's
Yep.
just the way it is.
I, I'm, dude. There's so many ways I can go with everything you just said, but the first thing I'm going to say is it's once you have context, you can start to understand.
Yeah.
And I think what has really helped me with the context is realizing that it's deeper than money.
Hmm.
That's one thing. I think that's definitely a part of
Yeah,
it. And there's
it is.
players in there that are being like pawns that are being used to use that money, because money is just resources, just energy, which gives a certain power, which
Yeah.
allows you to move things around in this world. So once you have the context that it's bigger than money, once you have the
Hmm.
context that there is a, you could say, an organization, they are very organized,
Right.
an organization that is running this world,
Hmm.
that is under I will call luciferic forces. They're literally here working for luciferic forces. Once
What
you
do you mean by
this
that?
is what
Just to give
this
anybody some
is
context that might be
yeah, so
listening.
this is the jump. that most people can't make,
Yeah.
because they don't understand that this is a spiritual war for your soul.
Yeah.
So what I mean by Luciferic forces is essentially energies or entities that are working for lower vibrational consciousnesses
Mm.
that are working towards control.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'll go micro to macro. We'll get real spiritual right now. So let's say you have a possession in a house, right? Like you have this haunted house. This spirit, you guys, we have to understand that. Let me just back up really quick. Quantum physics says everything is energy. So a spirit, an entity, a soul is literally just energy. It's etheric energy. And so energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed. So this soul comes into your body. Once you die, what happens to the energy? Well, it can only transform or transfer, right? So it's either going to, there's different planes of reality: physical, emotional, mental, astral, spiritual. There's different planes that this soul has to go through. And so sometimes it gets stuck. It gets stuck. It's a lost soul. That's what a lost soul is.
Mm.
Because usually our memory is not kept in our brain, it's kept in our energy field. And so let's say there's someone at a spirit that's haunting a house, right? It doesn't want to leave. The reason for that is because it wants to be in control. It wants to be like, no, this is mine. It's the super ego. It's like, no, I'm taking this, right? So that is a force, that is an energy, that is an entity that is operating under a Luciferic illusion.
Right.
Because it's trying to control that space. It's trying to like be like, no, this is mine.
Right.
So to give you the context of what a spirit is and how that all works, now just blow that up in proportion. Now blow that up into like the world stage. Because there are people that are trying to control us. There are people that, and we have to really get into transhumanism, because with these vaccines, most people don't know this, but inside the vaccines, there are actually something called hydrogel.
Mm-hmm.
Because this hydrogel is something that's been created by DARPA. It's the defense agency that creates like all these crazy different inventions,
Right.
create world solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, inside this hydrogel, you guys, there's these little tiny nanolipid particles, which actually can emit frequencies. They can emit electromagnetic frequencies and communicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, think about 5G. You guys, we have these radioactive forces being projected onto us that can also now communicate with different things inside of our body. And yes, I know it sounds insane, but if you go deep into the research, you can see this is 100% already possible.
Mm-hmm.
So to tie this up with a little ribbon, you guys, if you're not aware of the agenda that's already going on, these Luciferic forces, right? Control, just Lucifer control, if that makes it simple for you, that are trying to control the world population to eventually hook you up into an artificial intelligence.
Right.
So that you can lose your free will through consent, because you're consenting.
Mm-hmm.
Right now. If you are taking the vaccine, if you are putting these nano particles in your body,
Mm-hmm.
you are consenting to it. You're saying, yes, put it in my body. Even though you may not be informed, you're still consenting.
Mm-hmm.
And the agenda is to hook you up to an artificial consciousness to then take away your free will, which
Mm-hmm.
is God given. And you can't understand these things if you're not in the realm of spirit, right? Like, these are things that are deeper than money. Like I said, it's deeper than money. It's deeper than anything that you thought before. It's a battle for your soul. So
yeah, and I would like the words that come to mind when I think about like Lucifer consciousness is just it's separation and it's competition, whereas Christ consciousness is more about unity and cooperation. So the way I would explain it to anyone who asks is that it doesn't like you said, there's connotations around those words, Christ and Lucifer and all that, because, I dismissed everything like that growing up, because once I
Same.
seen through the veil of organized religion, I just thought it was all nonsense. And okay, well, clearly this book was only written a couple thousand years ago, and there's a lot of fallacies in it, so you can't trust any
Yeah.
of it. But when you look into the history of the Bible or any other holy books, you realize that they've just been co-opted and rewritten and retranslated so many times that you don't even know what the
Oh,
original one said.
no.
So if you consider that, maybe the first ones that were written actually had some truth to them, and also
Ooh,
the ones that are here now still do have truth if you have the
decipher
discernment
it.
to be able to
Yeah,
decipher
there
what's
you go.
real and what's not. But yeah, so I think a lot of us have that mentality that we go from organized religion as kids, and then we get disillusioned because we see how organized religion is so backwards.
Yep.
And then we're like, okay, well, screw that. I'm not going to believe in any of that. I'm going to go to science. And then we only take what's scientific. We only consider what can be shown in a peer-reviewed paper. And if it can't, and if there's no scientific consensus around it, we dismiss it entirely.
Yep.
And then because of that, when we hear words like God or Christ or Lucifer, our mind just shuts it out. But if you think about it from a different perspective, Christ is unity, that we are all one consciousness. We're all one energy. As you said, quantum physics has shown that. It's just all vibrating in different ways. We're all one being. We're all one entity. And if you look at the description of that energy up against the description of what the Christian Bible or many other holy books would describe as God, it's the same thing. It's infinite, it's eternal, it's omnipotent, it's omniscient. Like the omniscience, knowing all, that would be tantamount to the way Rupert Sheldrake describes the morphic resonance or the morphogenetic field. It is the field of which we all draw from. All knowledge, all knowing, all thought comes from this field. So there are so many parallels between what we actually know of spiritual history and actual scientific knowledge. So I think when people hear these words, they shut them out. But if you think
Yep.
of Lucifer as just the consciousness that separates people into individuals to the point that they only consume energy for themselves, they only want to better
Parasitic.
themselves. Parasitic, exactly. But if you think of it in that way, then you can just get rid of the word Lucifer for now until you can come to terms
Yeah.
that there's some meaning to it. Then you can understand
Funny.
that is the consciousness that runs the world. We are the dominant consciousness that pulls the strings of all the major agencies in the world, is a separation consciousness. It promotes unity and says we all need to work together, but it's all like, you all work together for us. You all, I'll start a business, you all work together to make this business work so you can work for me, and then everybody gets influenced to only look out for them and their own. Most people only really truly care about their friends and family. Every now and then we get triggered by some new injustice that we learn about in the world. Some new hot button injustice comes out into the mainstream media just to get people enraged. But if you think about it, each and every day there is millions of people in slavery. There are people being unjustly killed. There's rape occurring all over the world. This is happening now in every single moment. But people can't feel that because it's too much. So they push it down and they just do their thing. And then every now and then the media gives them something to feel virtuous about. Like some new revelation will come out to say, look, this entity did this and this is terrible. And then it's all over the place. Change your Facebook picture to have a ribbon around it to show that you care. And that, like, I'm not shitting on the people that do that. That's a beautiful thing, to be able to express the fact that you actually care. But the fact is that there's always something to be enraged about. But if we live our lives in that rage all the time, we're not going to get anywhere. It's important to have that reaction of rage and anger, but then you say, okay, now what can I do about that?
How
So
can I alchemize it?
Exactly. How can you take that energy, that rage, like, oh my God, this pisses me off, and move through it and let it move you into action? And that's
Yes.
what we all need to kind of come around to, is that we all need to take action, but at the same time, we need to do the inner work, because otherwise we're just going to perpetuate the cycle of separation and competition. So I guess if I'm getting at anything here, it's that there is that dominant consciousness of separation and competition that could be described as Luciferic energies that pretty much pulls the strings of every major operation on this plane right now.
Yep.
And we can shift into a consciousness, a global consciousness of unity and cooperation, that when we, whatever entities pull the major strings, they're pulling them in a way that serves each and every being. Not only that they get food and shelter and clothing, but gives them a space and the freedom to express themselves and learn who they are and find their gifts and share that gift. And then everybody on the planet gets an opportunity to truly be free and live as they always should have. But in order to do that, we need to consider that there is something called a spirit. You don't need to think of it in fairy tale ways. It's just the
Yeah.
energy. It's just the energy. And we
It's
know
that
what
simple.
energy is. It's just when you, it's
Dude.
a, it's an infinite consciousness, eternal divine intelligence that is always there, and you can tune into it like a radio signal. We are like
Yep.
radio towers. Each and every being is like a radio tower. And when you tune into that intelligence, what it's really saying is not like there's a man who is a god who just says, oh, listen to me, my child. I mean, that can manifest in a certain way, sure.
Hmm.
But what it is the intelligence itself is just a movement of energy, and energy wants to come to harmony. It wants to come into balance.
Exactly.
It wants to come to homeostasis. And that's what happens. So when you tune in, when you go deep in yourself and you meditate and you let go of your own stuff and your ideas of separation and limitation, then what you tune into is this energy that says, it's all the same. We're all one. We need to work together. We are all this one being. And when we work together, the vibration that you feel is what you know of as love or bliss or pleasure.
Yes. Ah, dude. Okay. So the first thing I want to hit on with all of that, that was freaking amazing,
Thank you.
was in order to wake up to a lot of this, you have to have the context of spirit. And I think that's actually why a lot of Christians are waking up right now. I
Yeah.
see a lot of Christians speaking out against just like the vaccine, but that's just because they also, and they've waken up to this new world order and
Yeah.
all this organization. We can call them Freemasons, the Illuminati,
Right.
whatever you want to call them. They're waking up to that because they also have the context that there's spirit and that there is a war for their soul.
Right.
And so in order to, it's so funny though, right? Like we're in a fallen world, that we are in a fallen world.
Mm.
There are Luciferic forces that are trying to deceive us and steal and take our energy through numerous different ways. But then at the same time, you have to also live with the perspective that we talked about earlier, is like, it's all just passing show.
Mm.
It's all just more story. It's like this has been happening for God knows how long, right? And it's never going to end, because that's just a part of this up and down cycle of life.
Yeah.
And so I do have a theory though, that let's just kind of back up really quick and go back into like the Garden of Eden, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tie this in with a couple of things that we've said. So the Garden of Eden, if you go back, right, everyone's running around naked. There's no clothes, nobody's ashamed. There's not really much. It's just a pure utopia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's that's like our natural state. That's like our organic state, is this space of openness and love. And then what happened, right? This snake came and deceived Eve to eat from the tree of wisdom, which then just allowed logic to come in, which then created separation. So the reason why I'm saying this is because our natural state has been completely distorted. So what we think as who we are as human beings has been completely just distorted in a way where we don't even really know who we are anymore. We
Mm-hmm.
think that we're someone working for a job. We think that we're in this system of, like the monetary system and the education system. We think that we're people inside of it, actually like working towards a common goal. But once you zoom out and you start really seeing who you truly are, you start peeling back the layers of deception, which happened in the Garden of Eden, which is still happening today. The deception is still happening. You peel back those layers of deception, you see that you're not really working for something that is actually positive. You're working for something that is false light, because false light is something that cloaks itself, it dresses itself up as something good, but it's actually inverted
Right.
to your own organic self. So, an example of this, think about celebrities, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of consciousness do celebrities evoke and project onto the public? What kind of things do they put out? Because a lot of times, like if you just go into the rap culture, that's like a very common one. They talk about women or men just like disrespecting women.
Yeah.
You're disrespecting a piece of life that literally gives life. So if you're disrespecting women, you're disrespecting life. And so we have these different rappers and singers and all these different celebrities projecting this consciousness onto people, and and since they idolize them, anytime you put something above yourself and you idolize it, you give your power to it. And so there's these different insertions that have been put into this fallen world. We are in the fallen world, so that you can take on a consciousness that isn't organic to your true self.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So you're taking on this consciousness that is pretty much just propaganda. It's just like false light. It's false. It's fake. It's not true to your organic, true self, so that you can operate in a way that isn't fully in alignment with who you are and the potential of who you can be,
Right.
which then separates you. The separation, as Eve, she was deceived. She ate the apple. She was now separated from God. That's the fall of man. That's the fall that we are still experiencing today, because we're still consenting to it.
Right.
We're still saying, oh yeah, I am working for a system that cares for me, that actually wants the best for my health, that is trying to support me. No, this is the same system that deceived Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It's the
Right.
same deception that's still going on. And so, in order for us to return to the Garden of Eden, in order for us to return back to our organic self, we have to, one, realize this. We have to
Mm-hmm.
awaken to it, which is going to be your own process. You're going to get there when you get there. But if you don't awaken to that, how are you ever going to get out of this fallen world? How are you going to get out of this cycle of reincarnation, which is really, from my own perspective and my own opinion, is these Luciferic forces that are continuing you to bring you through a cycle of I don't want to use the word karma because that's not the right word, but you're being kept in a cycle so that you can keep coming into this fallen world, so that these Luciferic forces can draw and take energy from you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not bad or good. We can make of it of whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, if you want to wake up to that truth, you have to start realizing spirit. You have to
Right.
start realizing that there is a spiritual war, that
Right.
it's more than money. It's more than, what's playing in front of your eyes on the earth stage.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought those were just some important points to hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like what you said just there about like it's not necessarily good nor bad. It is what it is. And that's the thing is like if you were to think of Eve being tempted with the apple, eating from the tree of knowledge, it's just that they were in the utopia. They were in just they were like a flower. They were just doing as the energy demands
Nature.
of them. They were
Mhm.
just in line with nature. But then by eating from the tree of knowledge, it's like you can separate your mind in a way to know separate things. And by doing that, rather than just going with the flow of nature, you can now think, should I go with the flow of nature? Who am I that I'm going with this flow? And like, that's the thing, is that's not a bad pursuit. It's just that to know, like, it's when God wants to know itself. It's like, who am I? What's going on? I feel like I'm just this, I'm this loving, beautiful being, and this is cool, but what am I and who am I? So that's kind of what happened with Eve, in a sense, is that she was offered the opportunity to look further and understand from an intellectual perspective. But
Yes.
it's the extreme of that we are experiencing. It's because
Mm,
it's as if we get obsessed with having every answer, and we cannot stop until we have every answer. But from my own experience, I feel as if I've had enough experience in the infinite consciousness, let's say, to have answers for everything that I've ever wondered. Like, there's
mhm.
very little that I think of now. I'm like, oh my God, I have to know that. Like, what is the answer to that? Like, I don't have that experience anymore. Whereas when I was like 22, that was my everyday life. Just, what is this? What is that? What is going on? It was debilitating and painful, honestly.
Mhm.
But now it's just, when you separate from that, and when you get obsessed with that I need answers type of thing, and I will not stop until I have answers, then you actually end up sacrificing a part of yourself in order to do it, because you become obsessed with only knowing, with only having knowledge.
Yep.
But when you introduce the concept of faith and trust, and
Mhm.
like, it's not blind faith, because for me, when I let go of that thought that says, "Oh, what is going on here? What is happening?" And I say, "Don't worry, it's all good. You're being divinely guided." Like, I just know that. There's been so many times where I've been in pain, like physical pain. I'm like, what's happening in my body? Ow, oh my God, it hurts. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, just trust, just trust. And I let go,
Mm,
and I stopped doing the whole motion of like, ow, and like trying to fix it myself. And I just let go. And then
mhm.
all of a sudden the pain dissipates. And this has happened for me thousands of times, emotionally, physically, and psychologically.
Mhm.
So it's important to seek, and it's important to, try to figure out who you are. But at the same time, when you get too obsessed with just the knowing of things without the faith, then you get lost in the separation. And
Yep.
then that's when you get, let's say, Luciferic entities that will say, come with me, I have all the answers.
Yep.
And then they're promising you something. Because there was a point, let me see, I had another thought there.
Bringing it back. Bringing it back,
Bring
baby.
it
Let's
back,
go.
bring it back.
Bringing it back, baby. Bringing it back.
Mm, I don't know. I think I lost it, but it might come back.
No,
I
it's okay.
thought, yeah.
I literally had a thought too, and it just left me. Which is so funny. I mean, that's how you know you're hitting something good, right? You're
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
dude, no, seriously though, like just on a side note, which is applicable to this, I'll be in sessions with people doing like my shamanic healings.
Mhm.
And when you get to something, you're like getting to like something that's like a core, like sometimes you'll get amnesia. Like
Yeah.
there's energies that will put a veil of amnesia over you. And I'll
Mhm.
like ask people, I'm like, so like what's the answer? Like what are you getting back? Because like we're asking spirits questions and we get feedback.
Mhm.
They're just like nothing. It's just blank. I'm
Right.
like, it's all right. You just have a veil of amnesia. We're just gonna remove it.
Right.
So I mean that stuff is real.
Mhm.
Um I was gonna say about Luciferic forces.
Mhm.
So Luciferic forces, one way that I also think about them is anything that tries to take your power away, meaning if you're idolizing something outside of yourself, that is Luciferic
Right.
because you're putting something over the relationship that you have with the God within yourself.
Right.
And that's number one because that's the only way out. The only way out is in.
Yeah.
And so when you to make it really simple to give more context around what luciferic forces look like, what that might be, anything that is parasitic, so anything that's just taking, right? Let's let's ground this information right now. Let's say you have someone in your family that's always asking you to do something. Like, can you go get this for me? Can you go do this? Can you take out the trash for me? Can you, like, they have the capability to do that and they're not giving an equal energy exchange. It's parasitic. It's taking, right? So that's a form of Luciferic energy because it's taking and it's not having an equal exchange.
Right.
So, not to say that these people are bad, that's not what we're saying at all. But what I'm saying is they may have different energies that are, or entities that are attached to them that are skewing what they may be experiencing in their life. And what I mean by that is, like, once you get into spirit and you start seeing things about like entity attachment and false light and all these things, one of the things that happens is you start having thoughts and you may be like, that wasn't even my thought.
Right.
Well, that's because once you get it, this is so deep, but some of y'all are going to get this, some of you won't. That's okay. There are certain thoughts that can be imprinted onto your consciousness to make them think that they're yours when they're really not yours. Because this is why neutrality is so important. This is why cultivating the witness, seeing thoughts pass by, is so important, because you can start to see which thoughts are organically yours. And when you can start to see which thoughts are organically yours, what that means is you can now see thoughts that are not organically yours, meaning Luciferic forces, putting them in your field, whispers, do this, do that. Oh no, you need to feel bad. You need to, like, these are spirits whispering into our ears. And for some people that sounds woo-woo, for some people that hits right on. Like, some people are going to get that, some people are not. But once you wake up to spirit, once you wake up to this like matrix, this spiritual matrix that we're also in, we're not just in a 3D matrix, we're also in this spiritual matrix, then you can start to see what I'm talking about. But if you don't have the context of that, if you haven't had a living experience of that, some people just won't get it, and that's okay.
Right.
There's other routes you can take to understand and grasp what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be that way, but I think that's important context for people, because, and also I can also feel a little bit like quantumly people being like, holy shit, well, how do I know it's true? Because there's nothing that you need to fear, right? Like, there's nothing that you need to fear, because evil, quote unquote evil, right? I'm just speaking relatively. Evil is only uncovering what is not true. So evil is actually good, because evil is showing you, if you choose, what you are not. Evil is showing you what is actually lies and what is actually truth.
Right. Exactly. It's
So
a
you don't need to fear it.
representation.
You don't need to fear
Exactly.
it.
It's a tool that is necessary in the evolution of consciousness. If we had only good, we wouldn't know what our capability in the other direction was. Like, we require these manifestations of evil on our plane in order to know what we are capable of when we separate from ourselves. Like, everything we see on the global plane now, of, if any, like, think of your own, if you're listening, then think of somebody in your head that you consider evil. That person is there to show you what you can be if you separate from yourself. If you choose to go with the comfortable route or the easy route, or to give your power away to someone externally from yourself. You have to be your own savior. You have to be the one that does everything for you. It's not like you're alone. It's just that each and every single individual has to take the responsibility for their own being. And by doing so, you attract a community of others who do the same, and then you're there for each other. But at no point can you just throw in the towel and say, oh, I got a community now, so they're going to do everything for me. In order to maintain the community, you have to continue to do your best. If you just give in and say, no, I'm going to get lazy now because I've got all these people who will serve me, they will only serve you if you will serve yourself. And if you serve yourself, to the point that you are healthy and happy and whole, then all you want to do is help serve others. And then it's just this cycle of everybody serving each other. And I actually regained my thought during your talk there.
Perfect. I told you it would come back.
I knew it would. That's the way I do it. Like, I like your method too, but that one never really works for me. When I said bring it back in, the only way I get it is if I let it go.
Just let go. Let go.
Because then it'll just go whoop and then curve back around.
It just when it exactly.
Yeah. So what I was talking about in terms of like, Eve eating the apple and choosing that way, it's one way you can go. And that way is the way of duality, in that if you come this way, you will get extreme pleasures. But the other side of the coin of extreme pleasures is extreme pain. And you can live that life as long as you want. You're frozen a little bit. I don't know if you can still hear me. I'm going to let you come back. Cool. So yeah, that's the thing, is like, this is why in the grand scheme of things, nothing is good or bad, because the way we've been living up until like maybe the turn of the century, honestly, it was acceptable and understood that everybody lives the pleasure pain cycle. You go to work, you work hard, and you really grind it out. And then at the end of the night, you get to spend time with your family, or you get to watch TV, or you get to go for a walk, or whatever it is that gives you your pleasure. Then you get to have it. And then we took that to the extreme. And now everybody wants the extreme pleasures, but they do not want the extreme pains. So they're trying to find more and more ways to avoid the pain. But that's not how it works. If you want the extreme pleasures, you get the extreme pains. And the more you try to avoid, exactly, the more you try to avoid those extreme pains, the more painful they will become. And you cannot avoid them. But if you choose to just go with the flow, you are one pointed. There's no wobble back and forth. There's no, oh, this is amazing. Oh my God, I'm blissed now. This pleasure is amazing. And then there's, oh my God, please give it back. This hurts so much. There's none of that. It's just, you're just going forward.
You gotta be with it.
You're just the flower that moves towards the sun. That flower in its consciousness is bliss, not exactly pleasure. There's a difference between pleasure and bliss. And bliss is that which you feel when you are in line and go with the flow of your natural state of being. So that's what.
I love that. Dude, quote that.
That's what Eden was. Eden was everyone just being the flower, going with the flow. And then Eve was offered the opportunity. Hey, do you want to feel even better than you do now? And do you want to see it? And do you want to, like, it's like taking accounting of it, like. When I'm in the highest states of being, the second I start to say, oh, this is so good, takes me down a level. But if I just be it and don't think about thinking about it, like the second you start to name things, the second you start to differentiate and like, oh, this experience is amazing, it automatically makes it less amazing. But if you just experience the amazingness without trying to grab it and box it up and call it something, then it continues. But Eve was given the opportunity to box it up and say, oh, what is this pleasure? How did I get here? What is this utopia that I'm in? And then by trying to understand it, you think you can hold it forever. Like, I don't want this to ever go away, so I'm going to try to box it up so I can hold it in a bottle and I can drink it whenever I want. And that is can be a noble pursuit in understanding who and what you are. But if you go to the extreme with that and you think that I'm going to have pleasure forever and I'm never going to face another discomfort ever in eternity, then that's what creates the discomfort. By trying to avoid the hell, you create the hell. But if you just accept that hell and heaven are a part of reality and that's just the way it is, then you kind of stay in the middle. You're
Dude,
like, yeah,
that's the middle way.
It's the middle way.
The middle way. Dude, I hate to do this to you. I got to use the restroom really quick.
Go nuts, man.
Because I'm like, I can't concentrate. I'm like, I got to go.
All right.
But I do have something to add to that when I come back.
Okay,
so
cool.
I'll be right back.
All right.
Just part of being in the human body, right? One thing I was actually going to say, I mean, we've been hitting a lot on the Bible, and I think I have a couple things that may even lead into UFOs, which I think you're going to appreciate. So one of the things that I was like doing just a little bit of research with the Bible. I've been really diving into the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
um, just as my choice. You know, everyone has their own little lane that they're in. But one thing I've been looking up with videos and just like reading the Bible, I forgot what they're called. I think it's like
Nephilim.
Nephilia, Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like in the fall of Babylon,
Mm-hmm.
you know, these entities like they pretty much have like now they have to take a host
Mm.
because they lost their bodies. So now they are just operating interdimensionally,
Mm-hmm.
but they are now taking hosts to actually be able to continue on, right?
Right.
And so, right, parasitic, another parasitic form of an entity where it has to take a host, it has to like live through someone else to be able to continue on and live.
Yep.
That's taking, that's, I'm going to take this body. It's like the same thing I was talking about the house, right? It's like, this is
Mm-hmm.
mine. I'm going to take this body. So, with that being said, to even go back a little bit, what we were talking about before, with just like these organizations like the Illuminati, Freemasons, people running the world, right? Running the show. Those people also have potentially may have also just been, I don't want to use the word possessed, but they may be used as a host for
Mm-hmm.
some of these spirits.
Right.
And so it's just like, to me, once you also have this context, it's like it makes total sense that there are these beings that are operating interdimensionally,
Mm-hmm.
taking host people that are unknowing to then, what's the right word? To then operate in a way that they want to bring
Like
certain things through.
they commandeer their
Yeah.
vessel.
So, exactly. So, once you have that context, it's like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. There's
Mm-hmm.
interdimensional beings that have an ability to take a body as a host and do what they please with it.
Right.
And so we got we got someone in the back there.
Oh yeah.
It's a little kid.
Is he naked?
He's
Because he
like,
often is.
it's the
Kid never
Garden of
wears
Eden,
clothes.
dude. Dude,
Well,
is that the Garden of Eden
yeah,
behind
totally.
you?
Oh man, for this kid, he lives the Garden of Eden. I'm telling you, man. Ever since summer hit, I haven't seen him wear clothes at all. He's just loving life, running around the
Dude,
backyard, jumping on
that's
the
such a
trampoline.
synchronicity.
Oh yeah, totally right. That's hilarious. Yeah, I live with my friends,
Um,
and they have two children.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, kids are the best teachers, so
Oh man,
you
he
could
teaches
probably
me so
learn so
much.
much from them.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
I was gonna add something else to that, but we'll let it be for now, and it might come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're kind
Um,
of jumping all over, but like I think
I
it's all
know
connecting though. It's
it is all
if
connecting.
you
Yeah.
hang in there, it's all coming
Yes,
together.
exactly. Stick with us. You'll see
Oh,
how it all comes
this is what I
around.
was gonna say. Sorry,
Okay,
this is what I was gonna say here.
go.
Um, I don't remember exactly. I can't paraphrase. It was a video that I watched. Um, but there's this guy that was like kind of looking at the Bible and seeing different passages in it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that it talks about is just coming from like under the sea. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of activity that comes from underneath the sea, um, he was saying as we tend to think like a lot of like I'll go to just you're gonna jump straight to aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Cool.
there's no way to I'm just gonna jump straight to aliens. So he was talking about a lot of the time we think that, you know, when UFOs and aliens come, they may be coming from like the outside and
Right.
coming in.
Right.
And that may be true. There's a lot of that. But he was also talking about how a lot of aliens that may have a negative alien agenda actually
Mm-hmm.
come from inside the earth and
Right.
actually underneath the ocean. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you've ever seen like videos of like UFOs like coming out of the water
Mm-hmm.
and going up. It's
Mm-hmm.
like once he said that, I had like a flash, like you know when you just like see images. I
Mm-hmm.
had an image of like a UFO coming out of the water, and I was like, "Whoa! Like this is crazy." Like a lot of things that I'm starting to see add up are starting to come true. It's like
Mm.
there's a couple celebrities that are talking about like the Galactic Federation.
Federation. Yeah.
And I've been seeing a lot of distortions with people talking about the Galactic Federation and saying that, you know, we can alchemize the vaccines, which maybe we can. I don't really know. I think you have
Mhm.
to be at a certain frequency, but
Mhm.
what I do know is we have to be all encompassing. Most people cannot reach that state of consciousness to
Mhm.
alchemize the vaccine.
Right.
And so I'm just seeing a lot of distortions with that. And when they talked about just like these aliens coming out of the ocean, and that there's a lot of just Luciferic energy that may be coming from underneath the ocean,
Right.
it just kind of started clicking for me. I was like, wow, like a lot of this stuff may be prepping us for some kind of infiltration. And I think there are good aliens. I think
Mhm.
there are good aliens, but I also know that there are relative, you know, negative agendas with aliens as well. And so I'm bringing this up because I think this can open up the dialogue for you, because I know you have a lot of information with, you know, UFOs and just like that realm, and I don't.
Mhm.
And so like I would even just love to open up a discussion like around that, because I don't really have any conclusive thoughts about it. I'm just kind of like open, and I've heard a couple things that are like boiling with these alien agendas that are kind of being talked about,
Right.
um on both sides, like good and bad or negative.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, well, I don't know anything for sure, but I just from, I've read and watched and listened to a lot of information surrounding UFOs, aliens, whatever you want to call it, for, I don't
Yeah.
know, 12 or 13 years now, maybe. And if I were to make an assessment, given all that, putting a lot of pieces together and listening to a lot of different
Yeah.
stuff, what makes the most sense to me is that there's a spectrum, and what the
Yeah.
way I see it, like honestly, the best way to describe it is just think about Star Trek. And if you were to
So
figure out
simple.
stuff on your own planet, say if we get Earth all figured out and everybody's living good here, then the next thing you're going to do is build ships or whatever to go out and
Yeah.
see what else is going on out there and try to harmonize the rest of the galaxy or the rest of the universe. So
Voyage.
I imagine that there are entities out there that figured this stuff out. They figured out their own planet, and then they went out to find other planets to assist and help. You can call that the Galactic Federation, let's say. In Star Trek, it's called the Federation of Planets, interestingly
Hmm.
enough. So they are, the good guys, let's say, the ones that actually want to truly assist people in their ascension of spiritual evolution. So I would assume that there is a higher race of entities that are here to usher us into our next level of understanding. And they've been here for who knows how long. And they're like, if you want to talk about some of the evidence behind that, one of the ways that really stands out to me is their interference with nuclear weapons. There's been
Mm.
plenty of times, plenty of instances since we developed nuclear weapons where we chose to actually use them and they were disabled almost immediately.
I
Like
heard
there's
that too.
been
Yeah.
countries that said, "Hey, I'm going to blow up that country," and then they'll press the button essentially, and it was like, "Whoa, shut down."
Yeah.
They'll try it
Yeah.
again, and
Like
whoa,
demagnetized, like
yeah, like it just
completely just falling out of the sky.
not happening, right?
Yeah.
So um that seems very plausible to me. When I just connect to that deeper part of myself, it's just obvious. Of course, there are higher beings that are here to work with us to bring us into our next level, because it's all just us anyways. It's all just one consciousness. So if you're everywhere, you're spread out across the spectrum of reality of all the dimensions. We have lower states of ourselves and we have higher states of ourselves, and all of these states of ourselves manifest physically in some way, shape, form, or another. So yeah, we have, let's say, for reference, we'll call it the Galactic Federation, this group of beings that are here watching over Earth to kind of just push us along gently into the next level. But they have this law, let's say, of interference that they will not cross. And it's not necessarily that they're
Hmm.
doing it out of some moral act. It's literally that they realize that it doesn't work that way. And the best analogy for this is that of the butterfly in the chrysalis. If you see
Hmm.
a caterpillar in a chrysalis and then it morphs into the butterfly, and you're like, oh my God, it's trying to get out. You know, you see it kind of pushing its wings. You can see the crack in there. And you're like, that butterfly wants out. And you take a knife and you cut it out and you let the butterfly go. The butterfly is not going to be able to fly because it hasn't
Mm,
flexed its wings enough. It needs the resistance. It needs to figure it out for itself. So these higher entities orbiting our planet are like, come on, Earthlings, let's go. Let's get through your stuff so you can come and play with us in the galaxy. But they can't come down and say, hey, here's a spaceship, or hey, here's the cure to cancer, or hey, whatever, whatever. We have to do that work. If we don't do the inner work, if we don't
mm,
do the physical work, if we don't do all of our own work, then we will not be ready to go out into the
mm-hmm,
stars. We will be the butterfly that just drops to the ground because our wings are not strong enough.
mm-hmm.
So that
Exactly.
to me is like, I can't imagine. I mean, it just seems so obvious that that would be the case, that there's higher entities on every level, on every spectrum, whether they came from another planet or another dimension. I don't even know if there's a difference between that, really. It's just higher levels of vibration. Everything's just levels of vibration.
Yeah.
So it's just maybe this higher galaxy way out there, or this higher solar system way out there, is just the reason why it's way out there is because it vibrates at a different
Mm-hmm.
frequency than us, and then it comes down to a lower vibration to appear as aliens or angels or saints, or even literally take form on this earth to be the Jesus, Buddha, the Krishna, to say, you know, if you
Yeah.
find the love within yourself, the connection within yourself, then, you know, you will expand beyond this planet and you will know the whole cosmos. So there's that. But then there's also the lower entities. Let's say, to give an analogy, would be the people on our earth. Like, we figured out how to do nuclear weapons with the help from like Einstein and Richard Feynman and all these good people that were trying to,
Mm-hmm.
what they thought was help reality. But then, you know, military generals and government officials and everybody like that, they took the technology and they used it for their own gain. So there are aliens, let's say, out in the cosmos that got access to this technology where they can travel faster than the speed of light and go to other planets. So then they come to a planet like Earth, see there's a bunch of chimpanzees running around. They take them, mess with their DNA, create someone that's a little bit more smart that they can control and say, do this for me and mine this gold, or whatever the whole Anunnaki story is.
Yeah.
Just to give an example, I don't know if that one's accurate or not, but that seems very plausible to me. If you're a lower
Mm-hmm.
vibrational entity and you want to control for your own gain, then why wouldn't you? And you have this technology where you can go to other planets, and maybe you got kicked off your own planet because you're an asshole. Then you're going to get in your spaceship, go to another planet where you can take your DNA altering technology, take a lower hominid type race, breed with them or genetically modify them in order to make them smart enough that they can do your bidding, but not smart enough that they can figure out how to rise up and free themselves. But eventually, through evolution, they will get to that point. But in our case, it just took us tens of thousands of years, or maybe like 6 to 10,000 years, because I think there was a time 30,000 years ago where we actually reached that point of liberation and we
Mm-hmm.
understood who we were. And then we lived that golden age for a little while. And after a while, we had that classic cycle of, what is it? Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. So that's the cycle, right? So
It really
we
is
were
though.
enslaved. We were created as slaves
Wow.
on this planet
Yep.
to do the bidding of some nefarious race that just wanted to take advantage of us. And maybe, like, again, they're not nefarious. They're just using us the way we use cattle. Good people use
Same.
cattle
Yeah.
every single day.
It's a
So
reflection.
it's a reflection, right? So they did that. They said, okay, we use this lower hominid race to do our bidding. We can mine all this gold from this planet and use it for whatever we want. And then over the years, we got to the point where we're like, I don't want to be this slave anymore. Who am I? What is this? How do I free myself? And
Yeah.
then we become strong. We rise up. We free ourselves. We create what might have been Atlantis, where we lived freely and in line with
Mm-hmm.
nature for however many thousand years. And then it got too comfortable. Everyone's like, oh, we got it figured out,
Mm,
man. We just plant a seed every now and then and we got infinite food and everything's
yeah.
great. Everything's abundant for us. We're living in the Garden of Eden. But then we get too comfortable. We don't have to think anymore. We don't have to work anymore. And we just descend back into sloth. And then we end up being like,
Mhm.
then our progeny forgets everything that we used to know when it comes to ancient wisdom because they don't have to teach it anymore. They don't have to know it. The same way now, most of our children on this earth have no idea how to make their own food, have no
Yeah.
idea how to do anything that actually keeps them alive because their parents do everything for them. So right now we're experiencing that whole weak men create hard times type stuff. Actually, we're in the hard times
Mhm.
because of weak men, essentially. But
Yeah.
now people are starting to realize how hard it is. So the strong men are coming back. The divine masculine is starting to come back again. So we went through this cycle before. We had it really tough. We freed
So many
ourselves.
times.
We worked so many times. Who knows, man? Like there's some findings that people, some artifacts that people have found that were like actual technological artifacts that were like literally millions of years old that
Wow.
couldn't have been it's not a natural thing, like it was some sort of
Yeah.
device that was found, so there had to be some sort of intelligent race like a million years ago. Now I don't know, I haven't verified this, so take that with a grain of salt, but these are the things I hear every now and
Yeah.
then.
Pulling through.
But that's the idea. So there are aliens came here, did that, enslaved us for thousands of years. We freed ourselves and then we got comfortable. And then when we got comfortable, we got complacent. And that's when we started listening to
Mhm.
those voices again that said, you can keep this heaven going forever as long as you listen to me. And then they came down and they infiltrated us
Mm,
because we were weak again. And then they were able to start that cycle all over. We ended up so out of line with nature that we caused or at least influenced a grand cataclysm that wiped out maybe 90% of the Earth's population. And then the only people that were left were the ones that knew how to hunt and gather and all that. And then we started from scratch. And that's what we say was the beginning of humanity 10,000, 100,000
yeah.
years ago when we started being like hunter gatherers. And then like within like 80,000 years, we all of a sudden started doing agriculture again. And we built our way back up to understanding. And then in the 1700s, you get what was called the Enlightenment, when we became obsessed with science again and wanting to understand. And we kind of moved away from the church and all their answers and moved into
Yeah.
Newton and all those dudes who were giving us answers with mathematics and science. And then we gravitated towards only science. And then we got rid of the
Yeah.
church. And now we're suffering because of that. We got
Yep.
rid of the spirit, only went to the mind. And now we're starting that cycle all over again. But our generation, people like you and I, understand the importance of the spirit and the balance between the intellect and the emotion and the spirit, the intuition, whatever you want to call it. And because of that, we are spreading this knowledge, this awareness of that balance all around the world, me and you and people like us. So over the next 5, 10, 15, 100 years, we will come back into that enlightened society again, where we live like, for lack of a better term, kings. We will be abundant. We will have everything we need. And then we'll
Mhm.
live that out for maybe a couple thousand years. And then we'll get too comfortable and we'll start the cycle all over again. And that's just how it happens. So yeah, I
There's the
mean,
ride.
it started with aliens, but that's essentially what happens, right? There's aliens on every level. There's the
It's all
grays are the
connected. That's the
one that are
thing.
like so disconnected from their spirit that they are the ones that will abduct and just study people. And they have, it's not that they're
Mm,
bad beings, they just have no emotional connection to their subjects. They abduct someone, they take them up to the spaceship, they cut them open,
they're
they're like,
all in
oh,
the. It's all mine.
it's all mine. That's why they have those massive gray heads, because it's
Yeah.
all intellect. It's no
Yeah.
emotion. And if they were to be, if they were
And
to
I
take,
think what you said
they
was.
would empathize. Go ahead. You're a little laggy, but
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Um. So I think that's where I love context. I always just talk about context. It's
Mhm.
like evil, good and evil is always just within context. It's
Right.
always within time and space. And so to give that context, like the grays, we can call them,
Mhm.
it's like they don't have that emotional connection. There's only the mind. And so therefore, like in their context, it's not bad
Right.
because like they're just operating through intellect. They're just
Right.
operating through like their own system, which however they got there, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like it's not really good or bad because like you have to look at from you know that perspective as well. It's operating out of the mind, out of the intellect. And so it's like
Exactly.
with that context, it's not really bad. It's just that it's just what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word when you like don't know what you're doing?
Hmm. The word ignorant pops in my mind, but I don't know if that's the
Yeah,
one you're looking for.
that's what I was looking for. Yeah, ignorance.
Okay.
It's just ignorance
Hmm.
because like that's how they were designed and where they're at.
Yeah.
And like whatever story you want to put to that, go ahead. But like it's all relative. Like
Yeah.
once you get these different types of context, it's like that's not a way to, you know, say what they're doing is okay because
Right.
on a relative reality it's not okay.
Right.
So it's like there's so many mind twists that you have to like move through to be able to like hold all of this is why it's
Mm.
so hard for most people because their energetic systems haven't been prepped to hold this information yet. And so this is why so many people deny it because they aren't in a place in their mind where they can stretch it enough to be able to literally hold it.
Yeah.
Even like when it doesn't make sense, even when it's like, yo, this is like, whoa, this is crazy, this is weird, this is like life altering information.
Hmm.
Most people are going to start denying it because their energetic system, their energy system, you can really just translate that into their information system, their data system, can't hold that yet because it doesn't have the hardware. It
Right.
hasn't been upgraded enough to be able to hold that information.
Right. Or well, the way I kind of see it, and it's kind of like that, but it's just this, their space is taken up. And like
Yeah.
we all have this infinite space of awareness, but when you already have a dogma, it's this like grid in your mind. So you already know a certain amount of things. And the only way you can learn something new is if you unlearn the old. So for people that hear something about aliens or, some of the conspiracy theories in our world, like that the world is run by psychopaths or things like that, they cannot hold that in between the box that says, but we have this medical system that has done wonders. You know what I mean? Like that does not fit in
Yeah.
that space.
No.
Doesn't fit there because it contradicts what they already know because they see evidence for that. I mean,
It's
you
like
could
vile
make,
corrupt.
yeah. Yes. So yeah, it doesn't compute. It does not compute
Yeah.
because it does not. And that's what this is interesting because this kind of brings us back around to something we both were wanting to talk about anyways. Is like every now and then I have to deconstruct my entire framework of thinking
Mm,
in order to allow for new ideas. And the example I'm experiencing a lot right now is the concept that our earth is not exactly the shape that we've been told. And I
yeah.
still have yet to find an argument that makes me go, "Yup, it's flat." Like I'm still haven't been convinced. I still very much gravitate towards spherical or globular or whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah.
I do the way I see it, the way I not logically understand, but when I just tune into the energy, I see everything as just vibrating energy. So I don't, even when I see solid things like this pen, I don't just see it as vibrating energy, right?
Yeah.
So that spherical nature, it still makes sense to me because when you observe everything as just this infinite grid that is just energy, if you have two lines of this grid going towards each other, they cannot occupy the same space, so they will spin around each other and create a vortex. And
DNA.
exactly. So like then you have these vortexes in this infinite grid. And then since they can't go anywhere in this dimensional plane, they have to penetrate another dimension, whether it's up or down or left or right or whatever.
Wow.
So when that happens, they penetrate another dimensional plane and that creates a suction. That creates what we call gravity or
Vacuum.
magnetism,
Oh my God.
right? So when you
What?
have that, all the other particles around it get sucked towards that center. And when that happens, that spin creates a spherical type shape around that vortex. So I see you're froze again, so I'll pause that thought.
There we go.
I don't know who has the bad internet, me or you, but okay. So where was it? Yeah. So when you have that vortex, it creates this gravity well, we'll call it, that pulls in everything around it.
Yeah.
And there will be all kinds of other particles. Particles are just like that vortex into another dimension. So that's what creates a particle. You know, like two energy lines intersect and they can't occupy the same space. So they spin around each other, create a vortex into another dimension, go from 2-dimensional plane to a 3-dimensional plane. And then that creates a vortex, which creates mass that comes in around it. Energy comes into orbit around it, and that creates a particle. And then that does it
Makes sense.
over and over infinitely to the point that one vortex becomes so strong that it pulls in all the other little vortexes around it. And this is what creates mass. So the way I see the Earth, the way that makes the most sense to me is that this happened. There was a vortex that penetrated into another dimension, and then all of the other mass that's out around it surrounded it, orbited around it, and it started to slow down and compact so much in around it that it become somewhat solid. And that's why at the center of the Earth, we have this molten lava. There's more energy there. There's more heat there. But then as stuff compacts in around it, it becomes denser and denser and denser. And that's why we get hard ground and rock and all that stuff. And then on the top, from the interaction with the ozone layer and the sun and everything like that, that's where life can flourish. So I don't necessarily think that the Earth is exactly how we describe it. I think the theory with the idea that there's actually holes at both the North Pole and Antarctica is the most plausible theory. I don't know if you've ever heard that one, but people have said that they've flown over the poles and then they've seen that there was this massive hole that they could go into the center of the Earth. And that would align with the vortex. You know what I mean? If it's a vortex, it's just like a donut. The Earth's like a giant donut. And essentially, right? So that's the way I see it. But I have a few friends who are very, very intelligent people, and I vibe with them on pretty much every single other thing we talk about. One of them is a mutual friend of ours, and she's been sending me a lot of information surrounding the flat Earth theory. And I was like, I looked into this years ago. And, I gave it a go because when my mind opened and I got rid of that grid within myself, I'm like, okay, so what's real? So I questioned everything. I'm like, just because I thought flat Earth was crazy before does not mean it's crazy just because I think it's crazy. So I listened, and they made some points that I'm like, yeah, okay, I see that. Like they kind of prove that NASA lies. I'm like, okay, well, that's
you're like, that's a given.
That's a given. But I was like, just because
a
NASA
government
lies,
agency?
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah. All right. But just because NASA lies about things does not mean the Earth is flat. That doesn't, they don't go hand in hand. Just because they're lying about maybe we didn't go to the moon in 69. I don't know. But that does not mean the Earth is flat.
They may have just distorted it. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So, so since many people who I see are great thinkers, they do not just believe what they hear. They criticize everything and see what makes sense for themselves. Our mutual friend being one of them. So after she's sent me a couple things, I was like, I'll give it another go. So I've been listening to a lot of information surrounding it. Some of the documentaries I've seen, they would start with arguments that didn't hold. I'm like, okay, I can see the fallacy in that argument right away. But then there's other things they say that I'm like, okay, this is new to me. And there's this one guy I listened to on a podcast the other day that was talking about us living on a flat plane, but everything else he said, I was like, yep, I agree. Like that we're an infinite eternal energy. He talked about Jesus and Buddha and Krishna all being the same thing. I'm like, okay, yeah, he knows that. But he says we're on a stationary plane. And he says that the stars and the sun are portals. They're not physical things. They are openings for us to move through. And that's why when you sun gaze, you stare directly at the sun, you receive information of higher consciousness. I'm like, okay, this does make sense with some of the grid work that I've accumulated over the years, but also I want to try to wipe out my grid work entirely and start from scratch and take on the entire theory he's given me and see if it makes sense with what I intuitively know is what I intuitively know is.
Yeah. Well, my question is like, can both of them be true?
Hmm,
Can on one plane, one of them be true, and on another plane, it also be true? Because
right,
you're talking about like these different intersecting lines that create different dimensions. Like,
right.
I guess the question I asked is like, can they both be true? Because also I know that when we leave our body, our
Mhm,
soul leaves our body,
mhm.
once it gets out of this cycle that it's in on the earth and it just stops recycling, like it does travel the galaxy.
Right.
And so like it makes sense to me when you say that, like our soul will travel, could potentially travel to through these portals, like you said, the
Hmm.
sun, and go back home,
Right.
wherever that may be, whatever that looks like. I don't know what it looks like, but so yeah, that's like the question that pops up in my head. Like, can they both be true? Because I also can see how that would be true, that they could be portals, because when our soul leaves, it may just travel through that portal and leave to a different dimension,
Right.
whatever dimension that is.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of see that in the sense that when you really truly let go of everything and you become just the light body again, then you would
Hmm.
ascend into the sky and become the light again. So
Hmm.
you would be the sun. You would, like,
Hmm.
that's, when Jesus was said to have been resurrected, then he hung around for a little bit, and then he ascended into the heavens. And people, like, there's artist renditions showing him like actually going up, and as he's going up he's becoming brighter and brighter and brighter, so he's becoming
Mm.
less body and more light, because he has nothing left. He's done his spiritual evolution.
Hmm.
He's become a being of pure love and pure vibrance, and just completely in line with nature itself, so he doesn't need the body anymore. So it's like he goes and becomes one with the light, which is the sun. Whether or not it's a fiery, gassy ball, I don't know. Or if it's a portal that he just moves through, I don't
Yeah.
know. But it kind of doesn't seem like it matters. It's just you become the light
That's,
again.
that's what I was thinking. I was like, all that's kind of just story anyways. Like
Yeah,
like
exactly.
what,
Right.
like, but like the point of it, like the meat and core of it is like I'm agreeing with what you're saying. Like
Yeah.
once you move up into these, and I've seen like different diagrams of the earth, and it's interesting because as you're closer to the earth, it seems like it's more dense. And so as you
Right.
move out more closer to space or
Yeah.
out of our ozone, it
Yeah.
seems to get less dense. And so as far as light particles go, it makes sense that once you leave that boundary or that
Mhm.
energy fence, that was the word that came through, like once you get past that, like you're gonna continue to like that's what the space does. It just continues to expand and
Yeah.
get bigger. And so
Right.
like to me, as you continue to go up, like you're gonna get brighter in your frequency and your light and your expansion. So it
Right.
makes sense for sure.
Yeah. Hmm. One major thing that just does not compute for me, because like I said, I'm opening my mind to really consider this theory to see if there's any meat to it. But one thing that just does not compute is that they continue to say it's a stationary plane, meaning non-moving. And I just ask, like, stationary relative to what? Because you might
Yeah, that's a great
say
question.
that the wall behind me is stationary, but that's
Said,
but it's constantly vibrating. And if we're on a spherical moving planet, then that's moving as well through space and so on and so forth. So it the whole stationary plane idea kind of puts forth this idea that there's a ground floor, like there's a bottom, which means there's a limit, which means there's something at which there's
which
nothing beyond that.
contradicts which contradicts what you said about
The infinite,
infinite consciousness.
eternal. Yeah. Right. So, like, the earth, everything on the earth is stationary relative to the earth, but
Yeah,
then the earth
on a physical level.
apparently is spinning and then moving through the galaxy, or moving through the solar system, which is moving through the galaxy, which is moving through a galaxy cluster, which moves through the universe. And that universe moves through another universe, or a bigger universe that everything is a part of. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how there can be a stationary plane that can stationary. Everything is relative. Everything is relative. Everything that's moving or stationary is either moving or relative or stationary relative to something
So
else.
that's a great question. What is it like relative stationary to what?
Yeah. So if
It's a
that's the
great
ground
question.
floor, if our, if our earth is stationary and that's the ground floor, then what's
Mhm.
under it? And is the answer nothing? I don't,
That's
that
the
doesn't,
most plausible answer.
right? Like, but it does not compute because
Yeah.
I have known and I have experienced eternality. I have known
Mhm.
and experienced infinite space. I am it when I let go of all Mike's thoughts. I am that.
Mhm.
I expand the conscious. I become one with the infinite consciousness.
Mhm.
And it's not like some whispers of a higher entity that are saying, oh, you're infinite. I don't hear anything. I just am it.
Mhm.
It's like the same,
Mhm.
it's just as real as knowing that I can feel my hand right now. I've had the same level of certainty knowing that I
Yeah.
can feel infinite space.
Just another
So
sense.
it's just another sense. Yeah, I know what it's like to be the entire universe.
Mhm.
And so when someone says there's a stationary plane and we exist upon it and God created it, it just offers me the same question I had since I was a very little kid. If God created it, who created God? And
Mhm.
if it's stationary, then what's under it or what's beyond it? And how is it stationary relative to what? Is there a bigger stationary plane that it's on? And what is that relative to?
Yeah.
It just does not compute with the eternality and the infinity that I know to be real. So
Mm.
that's where I cannot compute. But again, you could say that it just not does not compute with my grid work. But the difference is that it's when I get rid of grid work, is when I get rid of thought forms and concepts in my mind,
Mhm.
that infinite eternal is the obvious reality. It's not
Mhm.
like I'm thinking this is infinite and eternal. I just think it because I'm reminding myself of what I
Mhm.
experience when I let go of thinking. So that's the
Yeah.
difference. I'm not being indoctrinated into some thought process that tells me I'm an infinite eternal being. No one ever
Mhm.
told me that. That was something that became real to me when I let go of everything I know to be myself. I didn't know what spirituality was. I dismissed everything spiritual my pretty much from my teen life all the way up until my 20s. I
Mhm.
didn't know about Buddhism. I didn't know about Hinduism. I didn't know about these things. I just was suffering so much in my life that I wanted to know the truth. And then I just started basically uh, therapizing myself to the point that I dismantled every single thought and belief that I had, let go of every
Mhm.
fear and desire that I had, that I became nothing. And through the nothingness, I expanded into the everythingness, and that I knew that to be real. So it's just that there's no grid work saying this is the way it is. Because
Yeah.
when I'm in my knowing, there's no voice. It's just the
Yep.
experience of knowing that I am all that is. And when I say I don't mean Mike. I mean the universe itself is just speaking through Mike as a vessel, the same way it's speaking through Brad, same way it's speaking through anybody else. And this guy that talks about the stationary earth also proposes that theory that Jesus and Buddha and Krishna were just vessels for the infinite energy that is. So how can you have infinity and have a stationary plane? I feel like they're
Yeah.
inherently contradictory.
I mean, the only thing that comes up in my mind when you talk about this is like, okay, well, there's like some kind of like illusion that it would have to. That's the only way it could fit in this kind of box is if there's like some kind of illusion or hologram or some kind of yeah. Those are the two words that come to me:
Right.
illusion and hologram. That would create something that's stationary, or that would
Right.
create something that's not stationary. So I mean, that's the only thing that comes up in my mind.
Right.
Um, yeah, but no, you brought up some great points
Mhm.
for sure. But I mean, yeah, I
And
can't go any further.
that's something that I consider as well, because at the end of the day, this is all holographic. This is
Hmm.
all mind. Like the first of the Hermetic principles is all is mind.
Hmm.
Everything that we see as physical here first started in thought. And then the thought vibrated to a point where it became so dense that it made itself reality. So the people that firmly believe that we are on a flat plane in their world, they are physically creating a flat plane. And until they open their grid work to consider other possibility, they will always be living on a flat plane according to them. And the people that see the world as definitely a spherical globe, the way that we're told, they're existing on that as well. And there's no concrete reality. There's no one objective reality. All of these are just interlaced with one another. People that believe that Jesus was a man 2,000 years ago, they are living in a holographic projection that extends out into time and space, where Jesus actually existed over here in time. And then people that believe that he never was a man, there was no such thing as him, and he was just made up by
They're in a
by
whole
other
other
people.
reality.
They're existing in a holographic projection
Yeah.
that in time, back 2,000 years ago, there's these men that got together and said, hey, let's make up this magical guy. So that's the thing, is like, there's no one objective reality. There is an interlacing of all of these holographic projections by all of the separate individuals who are creating realities with their thoughts and feelings and their minds. So yeah, there is a flat earth. Yeah, there is a globe earth. And yeah, there is the one with the holes in the top and making the donut. Like, there's all of it. And they're all equally
Yeah.
real from the point of view of the people that are experiencing it that way.
100%. And I think that's where it gets, I'm losing my words here. It's like there's so much information coming through. I'm gonna let it go.
All right.
Honestly, like I think you hit it like fully. I don't think there's really much more I have to add to it.
Right.
Because you're much more well versed in all that than I am, for sure. But I think I'm just taking in everything you're saying and I'm like processing it, and it all makes, I mean, every question, everything that you're questioning with it kind of is giving me feedback to be like, okay, like, can some of this also be, because even though relatively it is true in other people's minds, just because something's true in your mind, just because it's true in the astral realm, doesn't mean that it's fully true, because there's a lot of shape shifting and distortions within the astral realm, within the mind, in the imagination, that there is a, see, also, actually, let me ask this question, because I am a little bit, because relative reality is such a model that I operate from, like, there is an absolute truth though. So how do you hold relativity with absolute?
I think when I consider that idea, because I do agree that there is an absolute truth, but the absolute truth that I see is that this is all a self-perpetuating, self-creating hologram. And if you hold a thought and consider a thought, then it becomes physical reality. So within this infinite potential hologram, anything can become physical truth, but it's also temporary. That's the thing, is like, when you think about absolute, it means all pervasive, all existing, all time, right? There's no time at which it isn't true. So the fact that we're on an earth, like say the spherical one is the right one, that's happening right now, right? But in a couple billion years time, that earth will no longer be here. Our sun will no longer be here, so on and so forth. So even if it's relatively true to us now, it's also not absolutely true, because
Wow.
it will have an endpoint. The only thing that's true is an infinite, eternal, holographic energy that through which manifests any possibility. So you and I may be on a spherical globe, but then somewhere out in reality, somewhere out in the cosmos, there was a higher dimensional being or a higher intellectual race that literally made the decision to gather up trillions and trillions and trillions of tons of dirt and then flattened it out and then threw it out into space. And then they put a bunch of monkeys on it and let them evolve. So that, like, in infinite in infinite cosmos, that is happening somewhere because it's possible. Like it's not impossible. I can take mud
Oh,
and dirt and make a flat plane, and I could put ants on top of it, right?
same thing.
So why can't a higher dimensional being or a higher intellectual being do the same thing with trillions and trillions and tons of dirt and rock and molten magma or whatever is necessary? And then they literally, I'm not sure the mechanism necessary to keep an etheric dome over it. I don't know what the dome is made out of. I've never heard that from flat earthers before, so I don't know. But I
Hmm.
would assume it would be some sort of magnetic pull. Maybe they put something the in the ground itself that magnetically pulls some sort of oxygen filled dome towards the center, making that shape. So yeah, I mean, somewhere there is a flat earth. Are you and I on it? I don't know, but it exists somewhere because we live in an infinite cosmos with infinite possibility. And if you can imagine it, how it can be so, then it can be so. And I can imagine it. I can imagine a bunch
Hmm.
of, maybe they're even huge. Like that's the thing, is like everything's relative, right? So there's probably, if you, I'm sure you've seen this before, like if you look at our sun compared to other stars,
Yeah,
it's
it's like
insane.
just a little tiny thing.
So imagine a planet that is trillion times bigger than ours. The beings would be trillions of times bigger than us, in which case they could grab a handful of dirt, flatten it out, toss it out into space, go and get some beings that are trillions of times smaller than them and insert them on this plane, or even just allow it to happen. Because if you put organic matter next to a sun, eventually there's going to be some life that spews out of that. So
Exactly.
I don't doubt the possibility of a flat earth. Whether or not the one I'm on is one, again, it's from all the evidence I've seen throughout my entire life, even disregarding everything I've been indoctrinated to believe as a young child, I still gravitate or lean towards me personally being on a spherical one. But like I said, with holes in the top and bottom. And
Yeah.
it's constantly spinning. Like that's the thing, is like I just understand that as a fundamental mechanism of reality, that in this holographic nature, that's how things work. Vibrations, as things vibrate,
Yeah.
they
Yep.
move, and as they move, they interact, and as they interact, they cannot just merge into one. And if they did merge into one, they would just become bigger. The same way you take two sine waves and you put them together, it'll just be a bigger sine wave.
Hmm.
They don't dissolve into each other, they become stronger. So if they're two opposing energies, then they create a vortex. And when you create a vortex, you have things that gravitate in towards that vortex, making a spherical body. And that just seems obvious to me. Um, so yeah, I think the only way a flat earth could exist is if a conscious being actually constructed it and then put it out into empty space. What empty space is not really empty, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
they put it where there's no gravitational pull towards a body, or they put it around a sun. You know, they were like, here's a sun, I'm going to throw some dirt on the outskirts and I'm going to give it some insane force so it stays in orbit for a couple billion years.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to me, right? Like and this is all speaking within relativity. It's like, think
Yes.
about relative to microorganisms. We
Mhm.
do this all the time with microorganisms. We
Right.
have a little microorganism and we create a little like ecosystem for it.
Right.
Like what difference is that compared to what we're talking about with like literally creating a little planet and then
Yeah.
putting it into a, you know what I mean? It's like the same thing, just micro and macro.
Yeah.
And then you
Exactly.
get into just like higher dimensional beings and like how there are pe- beings that are further along in their intelligence than
Right.
humans.
Right.
It's like, of course it makes sense. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I think I think really as we move forward with everything, just everything that we've talked about, it's important to really have people just continue to be open.
Yeah.
Because if you're open minded, you're open in your heart, like you're gonna be able to receive this information. And
Yeah.
like you said, you got to clear out all the grid work that you've already done, clear out
Yeah.
all the programs that you've already taken on.
Mhm.
And once you clear those things out, you can open yourself up to the things that we are talking about.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it's like you said, I like the way that you explained it. There's not enough space.
Mm.
There's not enough space for you to take something new in because you're holding onto a program that's in conflict with that.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
therefore you can't actually hold it because it just can't compute like
Right.
natural, because of natural law, it just won't happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Hmm. Oh, there was something there that popped up. I should have wrote it down. Uh, hmm. Oh well. So maybe it'll come up again, but let's, how are we doing for time? I didn't want to make this too long. I usually, whenever I did a podcast before, I capped it at 3 hours, but I was thinking maybe like 2 or 2.5. But I feel like it's already, we started 2 hours ago. So let's maybe say another half hour at
sure,
most.
yeah, that
So
sounds
I
good
want
to
to
me.
see what else you got there, because I feel it all connects anyways. Whatever thought I just had that I forgot, I'm sure it'll come back around given anything else we talk about.
I'm just trying to think of something practical so we can like
Mm,
ground all this information. I mean, because we've talked about entity attachment, we've talked about, dude, we've talked about so much.
mm.
Um,
Oh, I got my thought there. Um, I think when it comes to the idea of flat Earth again, I think another reason why I don't really gravitate towards it is because the people that typically believe in it, I think, anyways, from I watched a documentary before on um, Netflix, I think, and the common believer in it is also a Christian. So I think when you think of flat Earth, the people that gravitate towards that is they believe in the idea that there is only one manifestation of God in human form, seeing that there's like Jesus is the only guy. That's it. And no one can be him. And he's
yeah.
like, he's above us and we can never be him. Like, that's the idea. And that does not compute either, because I know that it's just, it doesn't compute with the absolute truth, which is that we are all just energy. So Jesus's energy is no different from my energy. We're all built of the same stuff. So I have the potential, as anybody else does, and even Jesus said himself, to become what he was. So
Coming from the man himself.
from the man himself, from the horse's mouth. So that's the idea, that that doesn't compute as well. And I know there's a lot of people that believe in flat earth, like that guy I was telling you about that I was listening to, that he says, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, all the same dude. So that's why I'm interested in him and to learn more about how he explains it, because he doesn't subscribe to the idea that there's only one guy, there's only one Jesus, and he was the
Mm,
be all end all, and that's it, and there's no more, and we can't ever be like him and all that stuff. So I think the flat earth is, they just kind of go hand in hand with this idolizing of a higher being. When you have a flat earth, you think that this is the ground floor and everything above you is better, and you're
mhm,
down here and it can come and help you, but you as a human are limited, and so on and so forth. But when you have the globe theory, or the torus field theory, then you see it as all as one infinite energy and expands out eternally, and then it's all thought anyways, and then the moment you cease to exist in this form, then everything that your universe was also is no longer, I mean, it's in the absolute, because nothing ever truly goes away in the infinite, but you no longer experience it. So by you no longer experiencing it, you are no longer running that holographic program. So that's
mhm,
one thing that doesn't compute for me either, is that like Jesus is the only guy. I think he was a manifestation, and a
mm,
very, very pure one in terms of infinite pure love of God. But then again, there's been other beings like him on this plane since then, and probably before then. So that's another reason why um the flat earth theory kind of doesn't compute with me, because the majority of people that believe in it think that they are separate from God. They think that God is something
mm,
that they cannot be they think that they're God's children, but they don't think that they are God themselves. But
mhm,
everything is God, because God is the energy that is eternal and infinite in itself, and we are not separate from it. Like, there's no difference between the molecules that make up my arm and the atoms and the protons and the neutrons and the electrons that make up the air around me, or
Mm-hmm.
the vibrational energy that moves through me. It's all the same energy, just vibrating in different frequencies. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because it's just another reason why that whole theory just does not compute. But again, I can let go of my grid work
Mm-hmm.
and hear someone out and say, can you reconcile all this? Because the only absolute
Can
truth
you
that I
put this
know,
together?
yeah, can you reconcile the absolute truth that this is an
Yeah.
internal infinite energy that is holographic and is all mind, and there's nothing truly solid? It's just all an illusion of separation of polar opposite energies. That's all it is, just energies interacting with one another. And you're frozen again.
I
Cool.
was gonna add something to what you're saying there.
Mm,
It begs a question for me because I mean, just speaking about distortion, Luciferic energy, and light,
mm-hmm,
is it? I mean, is it possible? I'm just playing with the idea here. It's just literally something that came through.
mm-hmm,
For me, most conspiracy theories seem to come true. They seem to like add up. They seem to, I mean, not all of them, but for the most part, I've experienced that. I'm like, okay, I can see how this is all adding up.
right.
But then there's some of them, like for example, flat Earth, that sometimes, like it's like, okay, there's some things that aren't quite all adding up here. So, like,
Right.
is it possible that? I mean, of course, it is possible, but I'm just begging the question here to open up a portal.
Mm,
Is it possible that some of these conspiracy theories are actually kind of like psyops to skew the truth a little bit to keep us boxed into some type of confined consciousness?
mm,
For example, like one of the words I've been kind of, and of course, like everybody has their different view on it, but the word that I'm kind of being aware of is like infinite, because if you kind of break down infinite, it's infinite.
mm,
I'm like, that's interesting. Like, why would the word infinite, when you break it down, say infinite? And so like there's different things that I'm starting to see. I'm like, okay, like, is this a word? Is this word magic? Is
mm,
this like something that it's like immortal, right?
mm-hmm,
I'm mortal.
right.
So like there's different word magic that's being used, and I'm just like starting to become aware of it. Um, and so my question is like, are there things within conspiracy theories? Because as you just move out of these different matrices, you start to awaken to new matrices and new
Mm-hmm,
things. And so like it from my where I'm standing, it is possible that some of these conspiracy theories can also be psyops. And
mm-hmm,
that's the main thing that these organizations like the Illuminati and Freemasons, who whatever you want to call them, to create confusion. Why do you think the media creates confusion around coronavirus, around back and forth, back and forth, back and it's just they just want to create confusion so you don't actually see the truth. And so to like tie that back into what I was saying, like some of these conspiracy theories possibly could be just be like psyops to kind of distort a little bit of what the truth is with the relative reality when it's not truly a reality within the plane that we're existing in right now, which is actually just a phantom reality, is what it's called.
right. Yeah, I would be inclined to agree. And that's kind of the way I've always seen that particular theory is that like the documentary I just started watching that somebody sent me, the first three arguments they give for flat earth are things that from my point of view and from my understanding can be refuted easily. So
Mm-hmm.
when you watch that documentary, it makes it look like the whole theory is just ridiculous and people just don't understand basic science, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that goes with the theory that you're purporting here, because there are what we call misinformation agents. Before the current media took that word and started calling people who are questioning vaccines or whole coronavirus misinformationists,
Invert
misinformation
everything.
agents have been around for a long time. What
Yeah.
they do is they will find people who already speak a little bit of the truth and then they'll go to them and be like, hey, I'm a guy from the inside and I know the truth and I see that you know the truth, so I'm going to work with you. So they'll fill this guy with all kinds of truth, but then they'll give him a little bit of misinformation so that when he goes out onto the global stage to say, I've got the answers, he has one flaw in his argument that makes him look like he's unreliable. And this is why I think there's two main theories that I think are psyops, and I don't know, but this is the way it seems to me, and that's flat Earth and QAnon. So flat Earth, flat Earth is, and they often go hand in hand. So flat Earth being that when you tell people that we're on a stationary plane, and that Jesus is the only guy, you inherently cut them off from their potential of becoming Jesus themselves, of recognizing their true power. It's putting Jesus on the pedestal. It's creating a ground floor. So you never really truly tap into your infinite energy because you think you're in a finite place. So, and that's that idea of infinite, like in our English language, in is kind of like contradictory. It means like to finite is there, but in means infinite means it's not finite. And I think that English was kind of intentionally made that way to be very contradictory to our true nature. Like, I'll give you another example. When I started learning French a couple of years ago, I recognized that French had a lot of different ways of speaking about things. The example that pops in my head is that you don't say I am hungry. You say I have hunger, right? You don't say I am sad. You say I have sadness, right? So just this language switch creates a more egoic way of thinking. When you think I am sad, you think it's something you can be, but it's not something you can be. It's something you experience, right? Sadness is a state of being and it comes and goes. But when you get used to saying, I am angry, I am sad, then you get used to programming yourself in thinking that you are a sad being and that's who you are. So I see a lot of parallels in English like this. When I started learning French, I realized that a lot of older languages didn't even call objects, like especially indigenous people, they wouldn't call objects as an object. They wouldn't say that's a rock. It would be like, it's rocking. It's a verb. Like the energy is rocking right now. It is being rock, but the energy will cease to be rock at some point. You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
So the way we used to speak was more accurate because things are impermanent. But English language has adopted permanency into its language, convincing the people that speak English that some things are permanent, which is brainwashing in and of itself. So
this is why they're trying to integrate English as like one of the main languages for the earth.
Exactly, because it's inverted.
It's been so it is.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is like you would think that infinite means that you were being infiniteness, but the way that we have commandeered that language and switched it is that words that meant something before, in meant to be in it, now it means you're out of it. You're out of finiteness, you know? So all the language has been inverted to create the consciousness that is out of line with nature. So that's what I see with flat earth theory as well, that if you give people the idea that you're on a stationary plane, it means there's a limit to your experience. If you give people the idea that Jesus is the only one, it means that your power is outside of you and you need to find a savior. And then that's the same thing with QAnon. I've looked into a lot of QAnon stuff, and a lot of stuff they say I think is true. But the idea that Trump is their savior, whether or not he's trying to work for good or not, the idea that, oh, we just got to sit back and wait and Trump's going to save us. Trump's going to make a big lawsuit.
Idolatry.
What's that? Idolatry. Exactly.
Yep.
It is programming people with idolatry. It's putting the responsibility on the external. And that is the misinformation. That is the psychological operation. And this has happened before. There was something that happened in like the 30s or 40s. I don't remember what the name of the operation was, but it came out to be a well-known operation that the CIA or something actually created their own movement of freedom fighters that brought along a lot of false information so they could infiltrate the freedom movement and make them think different things. So this is a tactic that the higher ups use because they know what's going on. They know how to manipulate people. They know how to mind control. So if you introduce this spooky guy who's on 4chan that gives you all these truths all the time, and then you like, oh my God, everything Q is saying is coming true. Everything Q is saying is coming true. Maybe it is, but the guy who's controlling that Q account, I suspect that he is only there to infiltrate the consciousness with more idolatry, to paint Trump as the savior so that people will sit back and wait for Trump to make everything okay rather than taking action themselves. So yeah, there is psyops like that. I see them all the time. And I think that Flat Earth and QAnon are probably two of the main ones that I see.
100%.
Everything else, and then there's the idea that aliens are harmful and that they're here to kill us. There's a lot of ufologists out there that paint aliens as a threat, even the ones that, especially the ones that are in the mainstream media right now. Like, you know, Bob Lazar?
I don't think I do.
Okay, so Bob Lazar actually worked on alien craft back in like the 50s or 60s. He was hired to reverse engineer some fallen craft. And so he worked on this craft, and now he's one of the more prominent names in the mainstream now. And a guy did a documentary on him and showed what he had learned. And I don't doubt anything Bob Lazar is saying, but the guy who did the documentary, now he's the guy that's on like not CNN, but maybe Fox News talking to Tucker Carlson about how, yeah, there are aliens here. We know these crafts exist and we don't know where they're from and we don't know anything about them. But I think that's the psyop, to make it seem like we don't know anything about them. So it makes them seem scary. Because back in the 80s, we had the commies to be afraid of. In the 90s and 2000s, we had the Afghans or the people from Iran or just Muslims in general. That was our new fear. And then when we start to realize, hey, we got the internet, I can talk to a Muslim and hey, he doesn't want to kill me. How cool is that? So then you start to realize that all these things you're told to be afraid of are not actually threatening. So then you come out with a virus, because at least you can't talk to a virus and ask if it wants to kill you. And it's a really, really great psyop because it makes people think that the air you breathe is harmful. And then there's many truths coming out around that. And once people start to wake up to that idea, then they'll insert the harmful alien agenda. And they'll say, oh, wow, now there's other beings from other planets, and they are commandeering our airspace. And they probably want to come here to enslave us, because look at what we do. We enslave people. So why wouldn't they enslave people? So I feel like that's the next big psyop after coronavirus and all that. But I don't know. I mean, like, I know they've had that in their playbook for a long time. When they're going to play that card, I'm not sure. But I suspect it will come at some point. But I feel like the people are waking up at such a fast degree, they won't even get a chance to play that card. I think that before the end of this year, the main truths of this world are going to be known, and it's going to be chaos for a while, because the majority of the planet are going to be so enraged that it's just going to be like, what the fuck? I've been lied to my whole life. Luckily for people like you and I, we've realized we were lied to a long time ago. And we've kind of come to terms with it, and we're navigating it. But that's our role here. When people wake up and they're like, holy fuck, I'm pissed, this is nuts, we got to play that role of like, yeah, you have been lied to. And I feel you, and I know what you're going through, but we're going to get through this, and we're going to create a planet that works for us. So yeah, I think you're totally right that they are psyops, and I could be wrong. Maybe Flat Earth is real, and it's not a psyop, and I just haven't completely understood it yet. But I will continue to look into it to see if that's the case. But so far, I have not heard anything that really convinces me that it's so. You know, like you have the whole old maps. There's all kinds of old maps showing that there's a flat Earth. But, 6,000, 7,000 years ago, we just didn't understand things as well. Maybe you look outside, it looks fucking flat. You're going to draw a map that looks, look at, I'm going to go to this place, and I'm going to draw this place, and I'm going to go to that place. I'm going to draw that place. But I know, again, I haven't looked enough into it. Maybe there's an answer to that argument. Who knows? But yeah,
I feel like you've done a fair amount of looking around with it, especially with people reaching out to you, showing you things, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the main thing as well, it's like with all this information, was packed with information. Like this was literally packed with information. So it may be a lot for some people.
Yeah.
I think really one thing that really helps with all of this is you have to know your own power. Because
Mm.
if you receive all this information, it can invoke a lot of fear
Yeah.
because the ground that you once stood on is now gone.
Yeah,
The,
exactly.
the, the that flat earth is gone. It's
Yeah. The
gone. No
carpet is
kidding.
pulled out from under your feet, man.
But truly, it's like once that's pulled under your feet, there can be a reaction to go straight to fear.
Yeah,
But that's also just a reaction to you not knowing your own power, not
exactly it.
knowing that you are made in the image of God. You are made in the image of the creator, which means you are the creator. You're
Mhm.
just a reflection of that creation. And so once you start really knowing that, I think that's the foundation right there. I think that's what I was looking for to really ground all of this is like you
Mhm.
have to know your own power. And
Yep.
knowing your own power actually isn't enough. You have to embody that power.
Right.
You have to start stepping into your power centers. You have to start speaking out. You have to start expressing. You have to start standing up against what is wrong. And of course there's a dance and an art with that because you also know that there's relative realities and so
Mhm.
like none of this really matters anyways, but then you can't use that for bypassing. So
Yeah,
there's just it's a lot to
it's a
hold
lot. Yeah.
and to explore. And so enjoy your exploration. I think that's probably what I really want to ground
Mhm.
it is like enjoy the journey
Yeah.
because even though there's a lot of crazy things that may be coming out and happening and like it's a lot of integration to have, it's also a blessing. It's like
Mhm.
imagine if you didn't have that awareness that these things were happening. You would just be operating in a way that would be conducive to your enslavement. It's like, do
Yeah.
you want to be a slave?
Mhm.
No. Well, then stop acting like one. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I think that's really how I want to ground that is just like know your power, know that you're infinite consciousness, that there's infinite potential. And for you to step into that potential, you have to first go there with your mind. You have to
Mhm.
first allow yourself to feel it in your body for it to really come and materialize in your life. And like I'm not the only way, the true way to embody your power is to be seen in it. You
Mhm.
have to be seen in your power. You have to be witnessed in your power. It's why when you get married, you have a bunch of people witness you. It's
Mhm.
to solidify that bond, right? So, like the same with your power. If you're going to start speaking out, you have to be witness speaking out for it to truly take root in your body, in your system. So, to really ground all that, like this has all been a lot of information. And so now the next step is like how can you use some of this information to step into your power?
Mhm.
Because that's really what we need right now on the earth stage is those that are willing to take this information and use it for the expansion of consciousness on this earth. Um so yeah,
I couldn't agree more,
Godspeed.
man.
Godspeed, y'all.
Beautifully said, man. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it really does. That's exactly where I am right now because for me, the way I experience it is that for the past 8 years, when I've recognized my grid work, when I recognized my programming, I realized that a lot of it was the vibrational patterns of others projecting that onto me
Mm,
and me holding it. Like people thought of Mike as a certain way, so that made Mike think of Mike as a certain way. But then I broke out of that and I'm like, oh, well, I'm free now. So the only way for me to be free was to not care at all what other people thought. I had to allow somebody to think something nuts about me and have it come through me and move out the other side. So I had to be this empty flowing vessel. I had to go with the flow for a long, long time. But then through going with the flow and just speaking truth as it came to me, people started to see me differently. And now the way people
mm,
project onto me is a more accurate version of how I actually am. So now I'm actually being grounded in who I actually am. I'm not
wow.
necessarily this river flowing anymore in my body. I still allow the river to flow through me, but I also got like this grid work of virtue and truth and integrity that builds me. So I am grounded in my body now, whereas beforehand I couldn't be, because everything that was around me, even my own thoughts bouncing back to me, circling back, was something that was untrue. So I had to let it just flow through and flow through and flow through. And then I started projecting outward a version of myself that was more accurate to who I am. And so now everything that's being pulled back into me is a reflection of my true nature. So I'm becoming grounded in that true nature. And it reminds me what you were saying also about how when the ground is ripped out from under you, you have a sensation of falling. You have a sensation that there's nothing around you to hold on to. And from the very moments of our first thought, that all we're trying to do is grab on. You know, when we're a kid, we're just infinite emotion. You know, like when we're a baby, we cry, we yell, we laugh, we just do. We're just that flow of
Yep.
stuff. But
Very
then
scary.
when you become, 2 years old and you start to be able to conceptualize things, your parents say, this is your name, I'm your mom, this is where you live, you are a human, so on and so forth. And it gives you a sense of groundedness because you know things about yourself. So it feels like you're standing on something. And then, then you start to be taught things about like, oh, you're a brat, or or you're special, whatever is positive or negative. You start to gravitate towards these ideas about yourself. And then, those things get dissolved because you go out into the real world, and then eventually you learn I'm no more special than anybody else. Or you learn that, oh, I'm not a bad person, I'm not a brat, I'm not a shitty kid, that was just something my mom told me. So then your grid work falls away. But then if what is kind of necessary is to kind of go back to that space where you have no grid work again. Forget that. Like, what is a human? What does that mean? What is a man? What does that mean? Who is Mike? What does that mean? And you let go of all that. And then it literally feels like you're falling or zooming through space, or whether it's a positive or negative experience is kind of based on how connected you are to your spirit. And
Yep.
if you know yourself as spirit, if you know yourself as infinite and eternal, and you cannot be harmed, then when you go into that flying or falling space, you'll just be like, whoa, this is crazy, but I'm okay. But if you believe in evil and you believe in hell, then
Yep.
when you get the carpet ripped out from under you, you're gonna be like, I'm falling, I'm descending, who am I? I don't know anything anymore. And it's gonna be terrifying. And when you feel that terror, your mind psychologically is going to try to save you by offering you an answer. So it's going to open itself up to outside influence. And that's when you get an invasive thought or a demon or an entity or even another physical being that says, it looks like you're spiraling right now. Hey, it looks like you're losing your mind. Why don't you come to me and I'll show you how to fix it? And whether that's going to be a cult leader or somebody with a pharmacological drug that'll make you
Yep.
think a certain way, or it's
Yep.
going to be anything. Like, that's the thing, is like, when you don't know that you are spirit and you have the carpet ripped from out from under you, then you feel like you're falling. And if you don't have that concept of knowing that you are all of it anyways, and you're safe and you're okay in that infinite unknowable space, then the first thing that knocks on your door and says, hey, come to me, I'll save you, you're going to go with it. And that's essentially what demons and entities are. It's an invasive thought. It's a thought form. Like,
Yep.
to give that to people that aren't comfortable with demons and entities and demonic stuff. Like, if that's not your language, it's no different than the whole universe is mind. And when you don't know yourself as mind, one of those thoughts can manifest in your psychological mind that says, I'll save you. Or, don't you feel this pain? If you don't do what I say, there's going to be more of it. You open yourself up to control from the external. But if you know that you're a part of God, if you know that you are the universe manifest in and of itself, when you lose the carpet, you'll just fly. You're like, I'm going to fly for a bit and I'm going to flow because I'm God, and that's cool. But then, like, all right, now I want to come back to the ground. And that's what I did for 8 years. I just flew. And now I'm like, okay, I got to find my grounding so I can actually manipulate some things around here, so I can change some things around here, not because they need to be changed, but if I'm here, I might as well bring love to others and understanding to others. Like, what other game is in town? Like, why would you do anything else?
Exactly.
So
Dude.
I now, after projecting my real self or new self out to the out to the reality that I'm in, it's getting reflected back at me. People recognize who I truly am. Some people question it. Some people still call into question my ethics or my morals, and that's cool. But I know it. I know my own heart, and that's all that matters to me. As long as I project outward what I know to be I am, then the people that have recognized that within themselves, they'll see it within me, will mirror it for each other, and we will become that grounded light. We will be on this earth, but we'll also be um, very little material and more light. And that's how we shift. We can walk around as material and shine the light at others, so we can fan the flame within their heart, so they become this fire that burns away all their material, and then they can get grounded in their new material. And then you light one match next to a bunch of other matches, all those matches are going to create a fire.
You know what quote came to my mind when you're saying that was, I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who you think I am.
Wait, what? Okay, I gotta process.
I am not who you think I am.
Yep.
I am not who I think I am. I am who you think I am. So
wow. Okay.
to break that one down, I mean, that's not always true, but I think that's a general truth for sure.
Yeah.
And it's almost like when someone sees you a certain way, they're going to project their mind onto who they think you are.
Yes.
Which is then going to affect you, because you're going to feel that all that is an expectation.
Yeah.
So what an expectation is literally just a blueprint of someone's thought that's being projected into your field.
Yep.
Which then you take on. You can call it a frequency net, whatever you want to call it, which you then take that frequency net on, or you take that expectation on, and you start questioning yourself. You start, well, is what I'm doing right? Is what I'm doing like actually in alignment with who I am? And so there's these people projecting their own opinion and expectation onto you, which then you take that on and you act out of coherence with who you truly are. So I love that you're talking about, as you are coming into yourself more, it's not just knowing it, it's living it. Because if you're not living it, you're not embodying it. If you're not embodying it, it's just a phantom reality. It's just a reality in your mind.
Yeah.
It's not really physicalized and materialized, which then doesn't allow other people to see it, which means they can continue to project these expectations onto you, keeping you trapped. And
it's honestly an experience of telepathy.
Yeah.
You are sensing what they think of you, and then you ask yourself, am I that way? Because you can sense their thoughts.
Yeah. Exactly, 100%. And I think that's like and this is why it's so important to know spirit, right? Like, this is what we were talking about. Spirit, energy, it's all the same thing. It's like, once you understand energy, you can understand everything around you is influencing you.
Yeah.
Like, who are the people you're hanging around? How are they influencing you? What kind of content are you consuming? How are those frequency nets influencing you?
Right.
Like, whatever you consume, you become.
Yeah.
So whatever you're consuming, you're going to project that out into the world, which is why it's so important, in my opinion, why we need to fast from taking in information sometimes. I mean, this is what Jesus did, right? He took 40 days, 40 nights. He went into nature so he can fully cleanse his field. He can fast from information. He can fast from the world. He can fast from food. He can fast from whatever is material, so that energy can move out and new energy can move in. Which you're talking about. It's like you're
deconstructing the programs and things that are in your material body so that you can now allow new light in. You can allow new information in. And this information is going to be a higher vibrational information because you've now cleared the density out of your body through fasting.
Yep.
Because mind, body, spirit is all connected. It's so simple. It's like once you understand these things, it just like it starts clicking. You know what I mean? So just becoming aware of what you're consuming and what you're surrounding yourself with, that those things are always influencing you, whether you're aware of it or not. And so for me, I've actually taken a lot of time to just fast from hanging out with people. Like I've just been in my own energy,
right?
You know, with my family. And I mean, even for us to get on this podcast right now, it took a little bit of a while. And so like, I'm still going through my process of like fasting from the world.
Right.
And so I think it's important for all of us to do that, especially within the transition that we're in, because it's like a factory reset. It's like a vibratory reset. So,
yeah. It reminded me of, have you ever heard of the Russian teacher, George Gurdjieff?
No, I haven't.
He says there's 3 types of food. There's the food we eat, the air we breathe, and our impressions.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
I like that.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, everything affects everything, man. You are like, the whole idea of astrology immediately made sense to me when I understood I was the entire universe. So it was like, of course the planets are having an effect on me. Everything affects everything.
I mean, it's like, it really does just become simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I think a lot of things that we've talked about as well, because we are so intellectual, it sounds complicated and there's certain words that are tied to it that like some people may not understand or get. But the more that you can just simplify the things that you're consuming and simplify like just think of ways to make it more simple in your mind, and you're going to be able to hold it. The reason why it's so hard for people to hold information is, number one, they don't actually really want to hold it. That's number one. Because in holding it, it means you have to actually stand in it, which means most people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But you also have to simplify it in your mind. Like your mind will try to convince you to not get it, because then you have to stand in it. So then it will make it complicated for you. And then you're just going to give up and you're just going to, I'm just going to move on to the next thing. But in reality, if you really just make these things simple in your mind, you can start to grasp it and hold it, which then allows you to have just this sense of empowerment. Because now you can fully comprehend. And when you can fully comprehend, you can fully express. Because now you feel confident in what you're receiving and what you're actually taking in. And the reason why most people aren't able to express things is because they make it so complicated in their mind. And they could just simplify those things. And I love this quote by Tony Robbins. It's like, the enemy of execution is complexity. That's with anything. Like, take that and put it into any framework and it works, right? It's like when you're making things complicated in your mind, it's what that's doing is like, it's breaking things up to a point where you can't even like assimilate the information together to get it out.
Right.
So simplify.
It is all quite simple.
The message there.
It's just all one eternal infinite energy vibrating in different patterns. Simple.
Dude, it really is. Once you understand that, it's like, it allows you to just see things differently. Like, you don't have to, like, when we talk about entity attachment, it's like, it's funny, right? Like, people have oh my God, there's so many different things that these people are talking about. No, we're talking about the same thing. It's just manifesting in different ways.
Yeah.
Go from, the singular point to good and bad to, all these different layers. It's like, just bring it back to the core. Bring it back to the core.
Yes, sir.
That's all I got, though, my man.
I think so. Yeah,
I think we got to make a part 2.
Yeah, this is probably going to happen again, I would imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's been beautiful, man. It's really
Yeah,
fun. It's a long time since I've done this.
Maybe this will be an activation for you to get back into it too.
I'm thinking so, like there's been a couple other people that I've actually met here on the island that I find fascinating. I first moved here last summer, and I was doing podcasts every week up until I left. And then when I came here, I just stopped. And because I was just living so much life here, I was like cooped up in my house back in Newfoundland, but on Vancouver Island, it's a paradise here. So I haven't done much in terms of this. And then I started that group, and then the group was like fuel for me. So that's just something I've been really loving and experiencing as well. But I really want to have conversations again. I want to have conversations based around certain things, because I just feel like there's not enough of that right now. I want to be able to talk about the craziest things possible and just sit down and be like, okay, so why do you think that? Why do you think that? And really hash it out. Because even in, I definitely suspect that what we're seeing on the global stage is not what we're being told by the mainstream, as we've discussed before. But even in the divergent narrative, there's differences. There's people that say the virus was created and it was planned and leaked from a lab, and then there's people that say there is no virus. I want to get those people together and be like, why do you think this and why do you think that? Like I want to mediate these things. And then people that, like I was saying, this guy that's a flat earther and agrees with me on every single other level of understanding. And then somebody who believes in the sphere or the globe. I want to get those guys together and say, what is going on here? What are we seeing differently? I really want to have these conversations that bring the people that are really practicing truth. They're getting rid of their grid work all the time so they can open themselves to new ideas. And their main goal is understanding what is true, not for any other ulterior motive, but to understand what is true. I want to bring those people together so we can really find out as best as we can how to describe the reality that we're in.
Dude, that would be so freaking interesting, because I think there was actually a court case in Alberta. A guy, his last name is King.
Yeah, I've seen that today.
Mm-hmm. And I guess they overturned, the mask mandates over there and the
everything.
Pretty much everything, because
quarantines are gone.
They didn't have any material evidence of, the virus being isolated. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my theory behind that, I don't like, this is just straight from me. I haven't been looking at anything. I think they're not isolating the virus, because I think there is a virus, but I think it's synthetic. I think it's been, created in a lab. And I think that they don't want to isolate it, because then in isolating it, it will just expose that it's actually a man-made synthetic virus.
Right.
Which will then, cause a lot of other questions. So it's easier just to not isolate it. And that's kind of my theory on it, because I know that there is, 72 patents on recombinant, coronavirus, which essentially means a lab-made coronavirus, synthetic, which is that goes into transhumanism, that goes into that agenda. So yeah, I would be interested to see those two minds kind of come together to talk about that, because by us saying there is no virus, I still don't know if that's fully true.
Right. Same.
Maybe there isn't. Maybe there is. Maybe the vaccine is the virus. I don't really know. So that would be really interesting for sure.
Right. Yeah. And there's people here that I've met in person that are really fascinating minds that look into this a lot. And it's been a long, actually, I did one in-person podcast since I've come here. But before lockdown last year, all of my podcasts were in person. And then I just switched over to Zoom. And then it was cool because I got to speak to people all over the world. But I would love to sit down with someone face to face and just have that real time feel and that dynamic of really, coherence with them and stuff like that. It'd be really nice. So there's a couple people that I might reach out to and actually sit down and have a conversation with and record. So yeah, there could be more. I don't know. I'll see how I feel. I don't normally plan anything, but
True, yeah.
trying to get a little bit more, like I said, I'm getting more grounded now. So I'm getting a little bit more structured with my planning, and it's helping me. It's definitely helping me. But
Sure.
I gotta find the balance between the ground and the flow, the earth and the water,
And that's
and
just
the
gonna look
fire.
different for everyone too. It's gonna look different for everyone. So
Exactly.
you gotta find what's in alignment for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, would love if you send a copy of this. Like,
Yeah,
I would
sure.
even just listen back to, because there was, dude, we talked about so much. Like, we
Yeah.
just were, like, spiraling.
Yeah, I know. I had a feeling it was going to be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That, man. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure always, dude. Like, I already
Mhm.
feel energized just from talking to you. That's how you know.
Same, man.
And other than that, man, yeah, always a pleasure. Looking
Likewise.
forward to doing this in the future whenever that aligns.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for your time and your presence and all the work that you do.
Namaste, Michael.
Namaste, brother. Until next time.
Much love. Peace out.